The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Business by Christopher Leonard. This is from the prologue. It's titled The Hidden King. Nobody ever visits the stranded little community of Waldron, Arkansas. But even if they did, a tourist would never see the place for what it really is. Most outsiders would be fooled into thinking it was an actual small town. On any given morning, the residents awaken and begin their routine along Main Street. Old men park their pickup trucks by the curb in front of the Rock Cafe, which opens early for breakfast. As the cafe's booths and tables fill up, a congregation of old-timers in cowboy hats gathers in a loose ring of aluminum chairs out front, smoking and talking and stubbing out their cigarette butts in a bucket full of sand. Later in the morning, Chambers Bank in the south end of town opens up, and the tellers cheerfully greet customers by name. On Thursday at noon, the livestock auction opens in a cavernous barn on the north side of town, drawing crowds of ranchers who haul steel trailers behind their trucks, with cows staring out between the horizontal slats. In the late afternoon, teenagers park their cars by the gazebo south of the auction barn, proudly displaying their Mustangs and Broncos like big game trophies. These events have a rhythm of their own, the clockwork functioning of a small-town economy. But it's all just window dressing. All of it would cease to exist in a moment and have no impact whatsoever on the true Waldron or its true economic reason for being. The real tempo of the town's economic pulse is measured by the coming and going of semi-trucks that roll down Main Street at periodic intervals, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the middle of the night, tanker trucks full of animal feed rumble past the empty stores and out onto country roads that lead into the hilly terrain that surrounds town. At dawn, other trucks trundle in from the hills, heaped high with battered metal crates full of chickens that exude clouds of white feathers along the highway. The tempo can be measured in the regular arrival of train cars full of grain and oil seeds that dump their loads at a feed mill that clanks and hums and churns all night. And in the parade of refrigerated trucks that pull up to a slaughterhouse near the feed mill and get loaded with pallets of frozen meat. This is the real functioning of Waldron, Arkansas, and its true reason for being. This is the heartbeat of Tyson Foods, the nation's biggest meat company. The Tyson plant on the north end of Waldron is the only thing that keeps the town on the map. Appropriately, many residents simply refer to it as the complex. That's because the Tyson plant isn't just a factory, it's more like an entire small-town economy consolidated into one property. The complex contains its own feed mill and hatchery, its own trucking line and slaughterhouse that covers several acres of land and processes about 1 million dead chickens a week. The complex is like an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses, an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses that used to define a small town like Waldron, the kinds of businesses that were once the economic pillars of rural America. Of course, tourists to Waldron would never see the Tyson plant, and not just because it sits on the north fringe of town away from Main Street. Visitors are stopped at its front gate and forbidden from exploring its grounds. So a tourist would have to be content to stroll along the sidewalks downtown, observing the fake Main Street, the deceptive array of little businesses that make it seem like a community. This illusory appearance cloaks Tyson's existence all the way from its roots in rural America to the grocery store shelves and restaurant menus where its products finally reach American consumers. The average shopper is usually fooled when he or she peruses the meat aisle, seeing what appears to be an abundance of choices and products. Tyson brand name wouldn't necessarily stand out with its logo gracing just a handful of products. But the rotisserie chicken slowly turning in its oven, the Bonisi brand pepperoni, the Lady Astor brand chicken cordon bleu, the frozen chicken pot pie, and the Wright brand bacon all come from the same company, Tyson. And then there is all the unlabeled meat that Tyson floods into the U.S. food system every day. The meat served in cafeterias, nursing homes, fast food restaurants, and suburban eateries where more and more Americans eat their meals. There's a very good chance any of the meat purchased in these places was made by Tyson. Even if Tyson did not produce a given piece of meat, the consumer is really only picking between different versions of the same commodified beef, chicken, and pork that is produced throughout a system that Tyson pioneered. Tyson's few competitors have resorted to imitating the company's business model just to survive. This book aims to explore the vast hidden territory between the remote farms and towns like Waldron, where Tyson raises millions of animals, and the final point of contact where consumers buy the company's meat. Unseen between these two poles is a hidden power structure that has quietly reshaped U.S. rural economies while gaining unprecedented control over the nation's meat supply. Just a handful of companies produce nearly all the meat consumed in the United States, and Tyson is the king among them. The company sits atop a powerful oligarchy of corporations that determines how animals are raised, how much farmers get paid, and how meat is processed, all while reaping massive profits and remaining almost entirely opaque to the consumer. Because Tyson and its imitators are based in the geographic and economic fringes of America in forgotten places like Waldron, the company has managed to escape the scrutiny it deserves. While Tyson's operations are remote, the company's business practices affect virtually everyone. About 95% of Americans eat chicken, which means they almost certainly eat chicken produced by Tyson. And then it goes on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way, which apparently is all guns all the time. We have this picture of the shooter in Florida wearing a Make America Great hat again, or Make America Great Again hat. One wonders if he was wearing an Obama hat, what the coverage on Fox News would be like. Of course, no such coverage like that in the corporate media. Sarah, one of the children who was at the school yesterday, tweets, tweets to Donald Trump. Donald Trump tweets out, "My prayers and condolences to the families of the victims of the terrible Florida shooting. No child, teacher, or anyone should ever feel unsafe in America's school." And she retweets his tweet and adds, "I don't want your condolences, you effing piece of S. My friends and teachers were shot. Multiple of my fellow classmates are dead. Do something instead of sending prayers. Prayers won't fix this, but gun control will prevent it from happening again." Amen. We are looking at our shootings. I mean, this is just a tiny list, right? The Texas First Baptist Church massacre, the Florida awning massacre at manufacturer shooting, the Fort Lauderdale airport shooting, the Boca Raton police shooting, the Dallas police shooting, the Umpqua Community College shooting, Trail Bridge shooting, Fort Hood shooting 2, Washington Navy Yard shooting, Sikh Temple shooting, Seal Beach shooting, Fort Hood massacre, Carthage Nursing Home shooting, Northern Illinois University shooting, Dharm Plage show shooting, Wakefield massacre, Caltrain's maintenance yard shooting, Fort Lauderdale revenge shooting, Air Force Base shooting, Luigi's shooting, Watkins Glen's killings, Royal Oak postal shootings, Luby's massacre, ESL shooting, USPS shooting, San Ysidro McDonald's massacre, welding shop shooting, Xerox killings, Seattle Cafe shootings, Walmart shooting in suburban Denver, Edgewood Business Park shooting, San Francisco UPS shooting, Pennsylvania supermarket shooting, rural Ohio nursing home shooting, Fresno downtown shooting, Excel Industries mass shooting, Kalamazoo shooting spree, Planned Parenthood clinic shooting, Colorado Springs shooting rampage, Charleston church shooting, Isla Vista mass murder, Hialeah apartment shooting, Santa Monica rampage, Pinewood Village apartment shooting, Sandy Hook Elementary massacre, Accent signage system shooting, Aurora theater shooting, Oikos University killings, Suhung Zheng Health Sauna shooting, IHOP shooting, Hartford beer distributor shooting, coffee shop police killings, Atlantis police plastics shooting, Kirkwood City Council shooting, Crandon shooting, Virginia Tech massacre, Amish school shooting, Capitol Hill massacre, Living Church of God shooting, Lockheed Martin shooting, hotel shooting, Wedgwood Baptist Church shooting, Atlanta day trader spree killings, Connecticut lottery shooting, R.E. Phelan Company shooting, Walter Rosser Company massacre, Chuck E. Cheese's killings, Long Island Railroad massacre, 101 California Street shootings, Lyndhurst High School shooting, University of Iowa shooting, GMAC mass. You know, it goes on and on and on. This is a partial list compiled by David Swanson. Tip of the hat to David for that. Meanwhile, Robert McGuire writing over at OpenSecrets.org, the headline kind of says it all. This is from last November. Audit shows NRA spending surged by $100 million. Now, that's not to $100 million. That's an additional $100 million. In 2015, they spent $312 million getting mostly Republicans elected to office. Total expenditures for 2016, more than $419 million. The main recipients, $30 million of NRA support to Donald Trump, $6.3 million of support to Richard Burr, the Republican from North Carolina, $3.2 million of support to Marco Rubio, the Republican from Florida from the NRA, $3 million to Roy Blunt, the Republican from Missouri from the NRA. Todd Young in Indiana, the Republican, got $2.8 million from the NRA. John Heck in Nevada got $2.5 million. Rob Portman of Ohio got $2.2 million from the NRA, and it continues. We have, you know, the Supreme, ever since the Supreme Court in 1976 said that if companies or billionaires want to own politicians, that's their right under the First Amendment's free speech provision. Ever since that happened, this country, and Reagan put it on steroids, this country has been sliding into what you could call fascism. That is the corporate control, the billionaire control of government. And that's why nothing is happening. This is the 18th school shooting in 45 days. In the first year of America, 18% of them. And what did Donald Trump do? Well, today he came out and says, oh, our thoughts and prayers are with you. That's total BS. Here's a thought or prayer for Republicans who take money from the NRA. May you burn in hell. Donald Trump, roughly 90% of Americans support universal background checks, but Trump's budget would slash funding that improves background checks by 16%. They want to cut millions of dollars out of the program that funds background, that does background checks. Todd Young, Republican, took $2.8 million from the NRA. Bill Cassidy took $2.8 million from the NRA. This is, God bless Bess Kalb, a writer for Jimmy Kimmel Live, as Marco Rubio tweets, just spoke to Broward School Superintendent. Today is that terrible day you pray never comes. She tweets at him, $3,303,355. That's how much he took from the NRA. Cory Gardner, the Republican from Colorado, he tweets, I am heartbroken for the students and families of those involved in this horrible tragedy, and I am praying for our first responders as they act swiftly to contain the situation. She responds to him, $3,879,064 that you took from the NRA. Rob Portman, Republican from Ohio, tweets out, heartbreaking news out of Florida. Jane and I send our prayers to the school, the community, and the victims of this tragedy. You know, Rob Portman, you make me want to puke. She tweets out $3,061,941 from the NRA to make sure Americans buy guns. Bill Cassidy, Republican, I forget what state Bill Cassidy's from. Anyhow, praying for the students, teachers, and first responders affected by the tragic shooting in Florida. Our hearts go out to the victims and their families. Another puke-worthy member of the Senate, Bess Kalb, tweets $2,861,047 from the NRA to make sure Americans keep buying guns. Senator Thom Tillis, he's what, South Carolina? North Carolina? One or the other, one of the Carolinas. Anyhow, he tweets out, tragic news out of Florida. Please keep the victims, their families, first responders, and the community in thoughts and prayers. And she tweets out $4,418,012 from the NRA to Thom Tillis. Congressman Ken Buck, I'm devastated, he tweets, I'm devastated to hear about the tragedy in Florida, praying today for the students and all those impacted. You idiot, why don't you do something? Anyhow, she tweets out $800,544 from the NRA. Joni Ernst, a senator from Utah, Please join me in praying for the students, faculty, and staff at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School, as well as their loved ones. Let us also show our gratitude to the courageous first responders. Best Calb tweets, $3,124,273 from the NRA for Joni Ernst. Rona Romney McDaniel. Mitt Romney's what, sister, cousin, whatever. She runs the NRA, or she runs the RNC. She tweets, my heart breaks for all the families, teachers, and students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, praying for all affected by the tragic shooting. Best Calb tweets, in the 2015-2016 election cycle, GOP candidates took $17,385,437 from the NRA, not counting the $21 million given to Donald Trump. It's amazing. And then meanwhile, Trump, one of the first pieces of legislation Republicans passed this year was called House Joint Resolution 40. And what it did was it eliminated a rule that had been put in place during the Obama administration that said that if you are so severely mentally ill that you qualify for Social Security disability insurance, you can no longer buy a gun. So which takes us to the new meme of the day, the new meme that was being promoted by shills for the gun industry all over. I watched several hours of CNN and MSNBC yesterday. I was horrified. The new meme, instead of thoughts and prayers, it's now see something, say something. I want to tell you about see something, say something, and this new BS piece of crap coming out of the right-wingers and the NRA. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day, my thoughts and your calls after this. Welcome back. Grace in Detroit. Hey, Grace, you wanted to weigh in on the shootings?
Yes, Tom, and thank you for highlighting that today, and I'm really sorry for the families of those children. A quick note first before I further my discussion here. I lived in Canada for 40 years, and I know what gun regulations are, and I know that guns are permitted anywhere other than a target range. And it's just so impossible for me to understand why Americans can't enforce gun regulations. That being said, who writes those laws? Those laws come out of a Koch-Alec group. And if we want to make an end to this, then we should be able to shut down that Alec group. Yeah. Our legislatures haven't written a law in decades. The best we get out of them is whose face goes on a stamp.
Well, you're absolutely right, Grace, and this is the result of a series of Supreme Court decisions starting in 1976 and reaching their peak in 2013 with McCutcheon, 2010, Citizens United, which said that it's no problem, it's perfectly legal if a member of Congress wants to prostitute themselves, essentially, if they want to sell their vote, if they want to sell legislation that they introduce to the billionaire Koch brothers, to the Walton family, to Bill Gates, I don't care who it is, if they want to sell it to a billionaire, or if an entire political party wants to sell out to a group of billionaires, as the Republicans have done with the Koch network, which has committed $400 billion to them for this election cycle, that's just fine. That's what the founders intended. That's why they wrote the First Amendment. That's what the Supreme Court said. It's total BS. It's a lie. It has destroyed our politics. In 2011, in his State of the Union address, President Barack Obama called out the Supreme Court for their October 2010 Citizens United ruling. And Sam Alito, one of the bizarre, words keep coming to my mouth. There are the things I can't say on the radio. I'm sorry. Sam Alito mouthed not true at Barack Obama. Sam Alito, a fool. How did this idiot get on the Supreme Court? Well, we had a Republican president, of course. Sorry, Grace, I'm going off here.
No, go ahead.
Well, that's what's going on, is the Supreme Court said it's legal to own politicians, and so sure enough, every group from the chemical manufacturers to the drug manufacturers to the gun manufacturers said, hey, let's buy some politicians. And while the Democratic Party, to a large extent, at least half of the Democratic Party has been saying, no, we're not going to be for sale, the entire Republican Party said, oh yeah, this is how we can get power. And that's what they're doing. And they don't give a rat's ass about the future of America. These Republicans don't give a damn about these kids that were murdered. You think Cory Gardner gives a good goddamn, forgive my language? If he did, he wouldn't have taken $3 million from the NRA. Excuse me, Grace. Pardon my obscenity. I apologize to you and everybody who heard it.
And you can go on Ted Cruz's Facebook page today and see where he's trying to divert the attention into, let's not jump into this so fast. It's continual.
Right. Yeah.
And yet he makes his money off of the Koch brothers and Mercers and everybody else. They've got blood on their hands.
They absolutely do. And what's so bizarre is I don't think the Koch brothers make a penny on guns. But they know that in order to win elections, Republicans need a coalition. So they support the hard right Christians, which the Koch brothers don't, I'm assuming have no interest in. They support the gun lobby, which has nothing to do with Koch Industries' profit. But they do these things in order to, and they support the anti-Muslim stuff. They do these things in order to get to have the power, the party that they own, have political power. Grace, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. So the meme that I was hearing over and over, and I was yelling at the TV. I finally, after 2 hours of watching coverage, flipping back and forth between CNN and MSNBC, I got so sick I said, screw it. And Louise and I went and watched Murdoch Mysteries on Hulu for a couple hours. It was like, okay, I'm over it. I'm over it. I want to watch a show from the 1890s in Canada, which literally is what we did. It just, and the meme that they kept promoting, the thing that they kept promoting that was making me so crazy was, oh, if you see something, say something. We should have been able to see this coming. As if to say that only in the United States do we have people who have mental illness problems, which is more horse stuff. I mean, this is just total crap. It is, well, let me give you the details. New York City came up with this see something, say something slogan. In fact, they trademarked it. When Washington, D.C. wanted to use it, they had to pay New York City. So they came up with this thing. John Mueller writes about this for the Cato Institute, of all things. This is back in 2012. But we've known about this for a long time. It began in 2006 in New York City. That year, the See Something, Say Something campaign in the New York subways and all over the city. Call the police if you see something, particularly if it has to do with terrorism. That year in 2006, it generated 9,000 calls. And by 27, a year later, it was 13,000 calls. In 2008, it was up to 27,000 calls. And by the way, every single one of those calls provokes a police investigation. So we're talking probably tens to hundreds of millions of dollars spent. So a reporter for the New York Times and then later a reporter for Cato said, well, gee, out of these 10, 20, 30,000 calls about suspicious activity, how many produced an actual arrest or conviction for terrorism or any other crime? Zero. I remember last year there was a story when I was living in Washington, D.C. about how the D.C. Metro was averaging something like 18,000 calls a year. How many terrorists had they caught? Zero. And so now we're going to take this, which does nothing. You know, the thing from previous years was, it's too soon to talk about this. The emotions are too hot. What crap. And everybody figured out it was crap, and everybody figured out this is just a way of avoiding a serious discussion while you continue to take your blood money from the National Rifle Association, Cory Gardner. And as we figured this out, and Richard Burr is at the top of the list, they invested $7 million, the NRA, in Richard Burr. You think he's going to talk about gun control? You think he's going to talk about an assault weapon ban? Do you think he's going to talk, which, by the way, Ronald Reagan supported? You think he's going to talk about bringing back the Brady bill, which Ronald Reagan supported? These guys are not Republicans. These guys are shills for corporations. They go to whomever pays them the most. It's just that simple. If you're a deadly industry in the United States, if you produce pesticides that cause cancer, if you produce chemicals that kill people, if you produce if you work with petroleum products that foul the air and the water and kill our planet, all you have to do, the Republican Party will take your money. They'll even pretend science doesn't exist for you. That's how sold out they are. And so the old meme was, oh, our thoughts and prayers are with you. And it's too soon to talk about it. Now, after Newtown, after Pulse, after all the, we're just not taking that anymore. So now they've come up with a new one. And it's all over the media. You see all these shills on TV over and over and over again. And you need to be letting your networks know when you see these people how offended you are by this BS. You see these people going, oh, well, if we had just had somebody report him. This idiot in Florida who shot these 17 kids, who murdered these 17 kids, he had already been reported to the FBI. There's nothing you can do. Under the current law, at the very best, you could adjudicate them mentally ill, but Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress passed a law, one of their very first pieces of legislation, that said even if somebody's adjudicated mentally ill, and there were 75,000 people in America who fit that category, so severely mentally ill that they qualify for Social Security disability, which is a multi-year process with multiple doctors certifying that you're nuts or so badly impaired that you can't work, that those people can now buy guns. So calling up and saying, I think this guy is a potential shooter, it does nothing. But this is the new meme. Anything to avoid talking about gun control. Anything to avoid talking about why the hell do we have weapons of war on the streets of America. You got this idiot congressman from Kansas. I tweeted this out this morning. I don't have his name in front of me, but you can check my Twitter feed. This idiot congressman from Kansas who, day before yesterday, announced that he's raffling off an AR-15. Yep, if you want to support his campaign, make a donation, and you're entered into the raffle for an AR-15, the weapon that killed those kids yesterday. These people are nuts. No, they're not. They're not nuts. They are sociopaths. They don't give a damn about the United States of America. They don't give a damn about our children. All people like Richard Burr and Tom Tillis and Roy Blunt and Marco Rubio and Cory Gardner and Joni Ernst and Rob Portman and Todd Young and Bill Cassidy, all they give a damn about is the millions that the NRA gives them.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And it's friggin' time somebody said that. We'll be back.
As tyrants take control of democracies, they typically do 7 things.
Today in the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, we're reading from a book by an old acquaintance and colleague of mine, Alan Combs, who passed away this last year. The book is called Thank the Liberals. You're a liberal. If you think you're a conservative, that assertion is surely quite shocking. You may even be so upset upon reading this that you're considering either throwing this book down, shooting a hole in it with your shotgun, or even worse, burning it the way Florida Pastor Terry Jones burned the Koran. Or you may feel the need to toss this book aside even temporarily and find solace in your Bible. However, that's a fairly liberal book too, so it may not help you get any more comfortable than this one will. The very fact that you haven't done any of these things yet shows how open-minded you are. So don't disappoint and go all Terry Jones on me here. If right now you're saying, but Alan, there's no way I'm a liberal, just do me the favor of hearing me out. Exhibit A, to prove my point that you're a liberal, maybe in conservative clothing, is that you're an American. If you're not an American, keep reading. You'll discover how great it is to be one. As an American, you're free right now to put this book down. Go outside for a walk, take a drive, or head to the nearest airport and fly anywhere in the world. Or you can stay home, go online, and get almost any information you want without it being firewalled by the government. And that's largely because liberals have stood up against such regulations as the Stop Online Piracy Act and the Protect IP Act, SOPA and PIPA, that would have squelched free speech on the internet and made criminals out of innocent content providers. This doesn't mean the government hasn't already overreached. When the government knows what websites you're going to because of the very unpatriotic Patriot Act, they're likely not paying too much attention to you and won't do anything about it. You want to leave your job, start a business, go to a food court, gorge out, just goof off. This is the land of the free, so go ahead after you're done with this book. America was founded on a liberal idea. The concept of a representative democracy without a state religion was a move leftward from the motherland, where the Church of England dictated certain laws and mores. Our forefathers thought that a state religion was repressive, and so they established one of our key tenets, freedom of and from religion. There can be no religious test to hold public office in America. That's liberal. A commander-in-chief who is a civilian, not a member of the military, it's liberal. Taxation with representation, that's liberal. A tripartite form of government where no one branch can rule over the others, yep, that's liberal too. Our founders, the ones conservatives revere so much, took these very liberal ideas and made them so much a part of our DNA that America is unthinkable without them. Let's look at some of the parts of our founding documents that often don't get enough press, but show how liberal we are simply because we're American. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution lays out the rights of Congress, stating in part that they have the right to, quote, lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, end quote. But the government is specifically charged with providing for the general welfare of our population has been much disputed by conservatives. Over time, liberals have fought for numerous items that fall in this category that have greatly benefited Americans, programs conservatives forgot they initially opposed. You'll read about them later in the chapter, Have You Thanked a Liberal Today? Article 1, Section 8 also guarantees your right to your personal intellectual property by saying that Congress has the right to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited time to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. If you invent something or write something, it's not the property of the government. This is why entrepreneurs and scientists flock to America. They know that here they are free to create and they will get the credit they deserve for their work. Our founding documents established a court system, giving us a way to seek redress from grievances. The Constitution establishes the creation of various courts available for different purposes depending on the issue at hand. Congress has the authority to create bankruptcy courts and tax courts to handle specific issues. Article 3 says the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish, giving us a federal court system and an appeals process. Article 1, Section 9 gives us the right to seek relief from unlawful imprisonment. A prisoner or someone on his or her behalf can petition for a writ of habeas corpus, an order from the government that it has the right to detain the person in question. This protects us from being held arbitrarily by the state without evidence and without just cause. Our entire judicial system outlined in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of our Constitution, is built on a liberal idea. The focus is on protecting the individual, especially the minority, from the tyranny of the majority. For example, the presumption of innocence, which is implied by the right to remain silent and the right to a jury, places the burden of proof on the prosecutor. The Fifth Amendment calls for grand juries to protect us from being prosecuted when there isn't enough evidence to bring a case against us. This amendment also guarantees that we can't be tried for the same crime twice, and that we are protected from having to testify against ourselves. This was originally written to guard against torture and forced confessions. Most important, we can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. If charged with a crime, there is a process in place to guarantee us a fair trial. This includes being given adequate notice to prepare a defense against those charges. The Fifth Amendment also contains the promise that the government can't take our property away without just compensation. We probably take all this for granted, but that's probably because we've never lived in a country where a terrifying knock on the door at 3 a.m. could mean a phony trial in a kangaroo court or a demand that we leave our homes because someone from the government needs or wants them. The Sixth Amendment continues the discussion of our judicial system through the promise that anyone accused of committing a crime has a right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of peers in the jurisdiction where the alleged crime was committed. You have the right to be told the charges against you, to confront your accuser in court, to have witnesses on your behalf, and to have counsel represent you. Thank the Liberals by Alan Moore.
Wow, the plot thickens. This is incredible. Florida Democratic Party Chairman Juan Cuba called out state Republican lawmakers today for a plan to discuss loosening background check laws just a day after 17 people were killed in a mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School. The Republicans, literally, they're scheduled to meet in 25 minutes in the State House in Florida to discuss weakening gun laws in Florida, making it so that if you apply for a carry permit, even if you don't pass their background check, it has to be issued within 90 days. And as of an hour ago, when this article was published, the bill had not been taken off the schedule. It's supposed to be discussed at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, which is in 25 minutes. And the Florida Democratic Party Chairman Juan Cuba says, the Republicans are cowards bought and paid for by the National Rifle Association. Because Florida Republicans are cowards bought and paid for by the NRA, they snuck in a gun provision inside the agriculture bill, making its way through Tallahassee. SB 740 is scheduled to be heard by the Senate Appropriations Committee tomorrow, Thursday, February 15th at 1 p.m. Amazing. Amazing. Steve in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind?
Good morning, Tom. I really appreciate your passion all times, all days, and especially today.
I'm so over this. I'm so sick and tired of us being we're the only country in the world that doesn't offer health insurance to all our people, so that if kids get shot by shooters, their parents have to pay for their hospitalization. We're the only country in the world that has these kinds of mass shootings. We're the only country in the world, a developed country in the world. I should qualify this. Yemen actually has about as many guns as we do per capita. But the Republicans want us to be Yemen. Forgive me, Steve. It's your turn to speak.
Oh, I think you're exactly right. Yemen, Somalia, wherever, whatever S-hole country, the Republicans want us, and their fake Christian values, and those are some of the underlying causes for this stuff, and the economic instability that the Republicans have caused by close to 40 years of Reaganomics.
Yep.
Well, I'll tell you something. I see something, and I'm saying something. And what I'm seeing is I'm sick of seeing Americans across the country being mowed down by these mass shootings. I'm sick of hearing, let's take a moment of silence. I'm sick of hearing our thoughts and prayers and all this other nonsense. And I'll tell you this, any one of us could be the next victim, any one of us. And frankly, the NRA and their groups, anything like it, they should be labeled a terrorist organization, and they should be disbanded and outright outlawed. What do you think, Tom?
I think that the NRA's day may be coming. It looks like according to Rolling Stone magazine, they laundered some $40 million from Russian oligarchs to support Donald Trump, and Republicans. We'll see where that goes. I'm not, optimistic about any serious prosecutions by the Trump Justice Department and Jeff Sessions. But this, it's not, but, we have to be very clear. The cancer in our society is not the NRA. The NRA is a symptom of the cancer in our society. The cancer in our society is the Supreme Court saying that when billionaires and corporations and weapons manufacturers and drug companies and pesticide manufacturers and petroleum producers and coal companies want to buy and own legislation or individual politicians, that's protected by the First Amendment. That was not the intent of the founders. That was not the intent of the framers of the Constitution. That was, we have fought against that kind of corruption repeatedly in this country from the 1790s until the 1973, 74, when out of the Church Commission, all these great laws were passed that were struck down in 1976 by the Supreme Court when they said, oh, no. This is what happens when you have conservatives running the Supreme Court. And it's exactly why Mitch McConnell refused to let President Obama nominate his own, the guy that Orrin Hatch recommended, Merrick Garland, that refused to let him do it. Steve, well said.
Can I ask you a question, Tom?
Quickly, yeah.
What would it take, since we had this pick stolen from us, and Garland was not even a liberal, true liberal.
Right. He was middle of the road.
What would it take to how can I say it? Get rid of Garland and get rid of some of these dinosaurs that are on this. Can something be, a constitutional amendment be put in place or something?
It wouldn't require a constitutional amendment. Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution gives Congress the right to regulate the Supreme Court, and the easiest form of that regulation, which has been done about, I think, 8 or 10 times in the history of the United States, is to change the number of justices on the court. And unfortunately, if we were to expand the court right now, it would mean that Donald Trump would be able to add more right-wing cranks. But the next time a Democrat, is in the White House and Democrats control the House and Senate, I would suggest that they pass legislation adding 3 seats to the. This is what Franklin Roosevelt tried to do in 1937 and could have successfully done, except that the court said, okay, we'll stop knocking down New Deal things. Don't add members to our court. And that's the only way that I know of to do it. The only way to remove a Supreme Court justice is by impeachment. It's only happened once, and it wasn't successful. It ain't going to happen. Steve, thanks for the call and thanks for the issues. Tony in Huntsville, Alabama. Hey, Tony, what's up?
Tom, I'm just really upset. I'm glad that you're passionate today. It's good to hear your voice screaming out. Man, I called to talk to you about what I call the Alabama embarrassment, which is Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, our Republican Attorney General, who's a piece of garbage. I don't know if you saw that interview that he did on TV earlier today. They were showing it. He spent the first half of his little interview bragging about all the things he'd done concerning gun violence.
Yeah, I did not see
it. City. You didn't see it? Oh, my God. He turned this tragedy, Tom, into a reason to go after gangs in the inner city and violence in the inner city schools.
Right, which is meta to Trump's, we got to keep the immigrants out, because have you noticed those gangs are mostly made up of people of color?
I'm so sick of it. That school is not even the inner city. It has nothing to do with gang violence. It has nothing to do with.
This was a kid who wears a Make America Great Again hat.
This is ridiculous. This stuff is so ridiculous. See something, say something. They did that. This kid bought this gun, Tom, himself at 18 years old. You can go out and buy an AR-15, an 18-year-old kid.
Right, and what the hell are we doing having weapons of war on the streets of America?
In the hands of children.
Yes.
This stuff is a deflection. I heard Jeff Sessions, and I was like, what is going on? What is he saying? He never even discussed the school. He never even talked about that.
Yeah.
He just took this and bragged about how great he was and what he'd done and how he was going to go after inner city. So now black people are going to pay dearly for this situation right here, man.
Amen.
And I'm so sick of it. And my head's about to explode.
And Hispanics. I mean, this kid's last name was Cruz. I'm waiting for Trump and Sessions to come out and say, well, he was Hispanic. Maybe he was part of MS-13 or whatever the group is.
It's so sickening, isn't it? I mean, all I can say is hashtag blue wave. That's the only way we're going to make some changes around here, is to get rid of those people and put some people in here with some common sense and get rid of these weapons of war.
And people who are not taking money from the NRA. Amen, Tony. Very well said. Thank you for the call. Dave in Armstrong Creek, Wisconsin. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I've been a gun owner all my adult life. I'm about your age. But I would have absolutely no problem at all if these type of weapons the sale was banned. They only have one purpose. It's to kill as many people as quickly as possible. And that being said, there's still 8 million of them out there. And if they banned them tomorrow, we're still looking at probably this is going to go on. And but this society is just seriously flawed. And you brought up some of the reasons, income inequality and just the lack of empathy and compassion for life itself, and what drives people into situations where
it is the
even
ongoing
think of
rape
doing
of our country by billionaires and greedy corporations. I mean, you can just boil it down to that.
Well, I would agree with that, yes. But we need some serious research done in this area, honest research, and they don't seem to be real.
Oh, it's not that they don't seem to want to do it, Dave. The Republicans passed legislation during the Bush administration making it illegal for any government agency to do any research on the damage inflicted on our society by guns.
Well, yeah, and it's real similar to the climate change stuff, too.
Yeah.
You know, very similar.
If they don't like the science, if the science potentially could hurt the economic interests of an industry that funds their campaigns, they pretend the science doesn't exist, or they outright deny that the science exists. They lie, they cheat, and they steal from us.
Well, it's a tragedy, and something's got to change.
Yeah.
So,
amen. Very well said, Dave. Thank you for the call. Just lest you forget. Richard Burrs, almost $7 million from the NRA. Roy Blunt, over $4 million from the NRA. Tom Tillis, over $4 million from the NRA. Cory Gardner, nearly $4 million from the NRA. Marco Rubio, over $3 million from the NRA. Joni Ernst, over $3 million from the NRA. Rob Portman, over $3 million from the NRA. Todd Young, just under $3 million from the NRA. Bill Cassidy, just under $3 million from the National Rifle Association. And that's just the beginning. I mean, you know, you get a list of members of the House of Representatives, and it's virtually every Republican and about a dozen Democrats. The NRA has been passing out, in the 2016 election cycle, hundreds of millions of dollars. Any surprise that our children are being slaughtered? We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. Welcome back. James in Wichita, Kansas. Hey, James, what's up?
Hey, Tom, you're on it today.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, you're really on it today. But I have a question. How much further of a background check do they need to do? I mean, before it gets to be like a Big Brother thing. Like, how much further of a do they have to delve into your life in order for you to have an AR-15 or for you to have
all the background check does, James, is check your criminal record. And before they struck the law down, also checked Social Security records to see if you are receiving Social Security disability payments because you have been determined to be seriously mentally ill. That's it. So it's simply looking at records that the Social Security records are not a matter of public record, but the criminal background stuff is all public record. So I don't see this as Big Brother at all, number one. Number two, 90% of Americans, including Republicans, support background checks. Number three, background checks is just the smallest piece of what needs to be done. What we need to do is say there is no reason on God's earth for there to be weapons of war in the hands of civilians. It's crazy. I mean, if you've ever been through basic training, the effort that goes into teaching people how to actually appropriately use and respect a weapon is extraordinary. Go through police training, same deal.
Yeah,
but none of that happens when you just walk into Walmart and buy a gun.
Okay, but I've done the training and everything, so that's why I enjoy shooting and carrying on. But
I like sports shooting. My brother and I are competitive sports shooters. That doesn't mean that I don't think that we should have some rational gun control in this country.
Well, again, it's taking 8 months for me to get a suppressor, and you know, y'all.
What do you need a suppressor for, James?
Okay, I'm about to tell you. Hold on. You're on it today, like I say. Hold on. The suppressor, I use it for hunting. It's to use when my family comes out from California, I want it to be able for them to shoot and not have their hearing damage or for us to listen.
But when you shoot using a suppressor, number one, that's not sportsmanlike. You're warning all the game in the area that there's a guy with a gun. And number two, it's dangerous because people in the area don't realize that somebody's shooting live ammunition.
Hold on, can I finish? So, like I say, if you're in your hunting spot and I'm in my hunting spot, if I shoot my deer suppressed, we'll still have a chance at a deer. It's not that it's like I think you guys have the notion that it's like in the movies. A silencer or a suppressor really isn't like that. You know, especially for your bigger rounds. It's really, instead of it going 100 yards, the sound going 100 yards, maybe the sound will only go 25 yards. Do you understand what I mean?
I have shot using suppressors. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So you're not getting the full explosion of it. So that's, again, so I have to wait another 8 months every time I do this. And every time you do it, you have to pay,
I think that's entirely appropriate, James. I think it's entirely appropriate. And I think using suppressors for hunting is not sportsmanlike.
How many times do I have to pass a background check in order to get so many silencers? How many times do I have to keep?
I don't think you should be able to buy a silencer, James.
But how many? Oh my gosh. Okay.
Silencers are used mostly by criminals.
But I'm not a criminal. So again, you're not answering my question. So
I just answered your question. I don't think you should be able to use a silencer, and I think if you're using a silencer for hunting, you are not a sportsman. You're cheating.
You're just so. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we have a difference of opinion on this, and we are both gun users. But, you know, I'm not going to convince you. You're not going to convince me. James, thank you for a civil conversation anyway. I appreciate it. We'll be back. For all the progressive news of the day, check out the Hartmann Report, hartmannreport.com. No ads, totally free. You can comment. It's a great site. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Michael in Bronx, New York, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I wish I was there with you in person. Give you a big high five for everything that you said.
Thank you, Michael.
And a big hug to the young lady that sent the tweet back to Mr. 45 Trump. I mean, 100% spot on. And already right-wingers are coming up with the talking point of we shouldn't be talking about gun control. We should be talking about mental illness.
Right.
And I'm like, duh. That's one of the reasons and things that we've been voicing that not everyone should be having a gun. And, you know, when you have point out about the people that have been taking money from the NRA, you know, I'm tired of calling this stuff tragedies because they're no longer tragedies. They're crimes. They are criminals. They are terrorists. And the thing is that already I can see it right now that Mr. Trump is already calling these people and this person are not and all that. But if it was a person of color, you can bet very sure that he'll be calling him a criminal or a terrorist.
Or a thug.
Because the proof I've had was the two incidents, identical incidents, where the suspects used the motor vehicle to ram down pedestrians. The one in New York City, a Muslim. He automatically calls that Muslim a terrorist. But then in Charlottesville, where Trump referred to them as very fine people. So it's no longer of the action that is being committed, but the identity of the offender as to determine if it's a crime or just a mental illness nut tragedy. Right. I'm sick and tired of the trivializing of that. So right-wingers, spare me with the thoughts and prayers crap. All right, you're talking
and spare
to a
us and spare us the we have to worry about mentally ill and see something, say something crap, because that's exactly what it is crap.
Let me tell
spare
you
us that. We are not the only country in the world with mentally ill people. We are the only country in the world where mentally ill people can buy an AR-15 and shoot up a school. That's the problem.
You know something, Tom? I've many times here in New York City, I've seen something out of the ordinary. I've seen something. I've said something. And it's just because the operator on the other line, who sounds like a right-winger, doesn't like what I'm saying and doesn't want to take what I'm saying seriously. You mean you guys are the ones who told us if we see something, say something. I've said something. You don't like it, so now I smell something.
The whole say something, see something thing is a placebo. It's a hustle. It's a scam. It doesn't produce actionable or useful intelligence. And now it's all over our airports, too. All it does is condition Americans to think that we should be turning in our neighbors. During the Nazi era in Germany, and yes, Godwin's law, but during the Nazi era in Germany, they had a see something, say something program where you called in into your local radio station and did what was called a denunciation. You denounced your neighbors. It was a way of saying, oh, well, I think my neighbor is a communist. I think my neighbor is a Jew. I think my neighbor is a liberal. I think my neighbor is gay. And the Gestapo would go to the houses and arrest people and send them off to the concentration camps. They got there because they started with see something, say something. This is not a good thing. Michael, well said. Thank you for the call. Liam in Seattle. Hey, Liam, what's up?
You know, I agree with everything that you guys are saying, and I hate to dilute or distract the discussion, but we have a serious crisis in our high schools with suicides, depression, sexual abuse, kids running away from home because they've got problems in their home. And I think kids need to see psychologists. We need to start at the state level. Every kid sees a psychologist at school.
Liam, that's all true, and you're right. It is a diversion from what we're talking about today. And in addition to that, one of the things that we absolutely know for a fact, and I encourage you to check out Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett's work over at the Spirit Level, I think spiritlevel.org. Google it or DuckDuckGo it. They wrote a book called The Spirit Level, and they wrote a book called Why Inequality Matters. And what they found was that as societies get more unequal, as we have since 1980, since Reagan destroyed egalitarian America and turned us into me society America, as societies become more unequal, as the rich get richer and the middle class starts to become the working poor, then you have an explosion in mental illness, in teen pregnancies, in suicides, in adolescent suicide. You have an explosion of all those things that you just described. You can lay those at the feet of your libertarian billionaires as well. Tim in Matawan, Michigan. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, I called you about 3 or 4 years ago and told you when I win the lottery, I'm going to buy 2 semi-truckloads full of AR-15s and give them away to the poorest people in town as long as they join the NRA. Well, I got a better idea. I think the only thing that would work is if they took the guns away from everybody except me.
Well, except me. What they did in Australia, and nobody's talking about this in the news, of course, because it involves gun control. And, the NRA spent $300 million plus in the last election cycle. Much of that money, if not most of that money, ended up on television. So it shouldn't be a surprise that the television networks are not going to talk about this. But what Australia did, they had a god-awful, horrible mass shooting. They'd been having mass shootings almost every year for years. And they had a mass shooting in Tasmania, an island just to the south of Australia that's part of Australia, sort of like Puerto Rico is part of the United States. And that mass shooting was so horrific, and it was so well reported, and the newspapers showed the pictures of the bullet-riddled bodies, that Australia said, okay, that's it, no more. And they passed strong gun control laws that said if you want to have a gun, fine, prove that you have a reason for it. Sports shooting, fine, no problem. You can have a gun for that. Hunting, fine. You can have a gun for that. Self-protection, fine. You can have a gun for that. You just have to prove that you actually are going to do it for that, number one. Number two, you have to have a license. Number three, the gun has to be registered. I don't know about the insurance, the third part of my proposal, but I think we should treat guns just like we treat cars. But Australia did that, and then they announced a national buyback program where the government was buying back guns from people who really didn't want them anymore. They collected over 600,000 guns. There has not, this was in the late 90s, I think it was 97 that this happened. There has not been a mass shooting in Australia since then. Not one. This is our 14th or 18th school shooting this year. We have some lessons to learn here. And it's the real tragedy is that our media is not willing to confront the National Rifle Association. They want to continue taking their money through their political campaigns and talk about what other countries have done that works.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Jane Mayer's new book, Dark Money, the history of the billionaires behind the rise of the radical right. And it's, by the way, just an extraordinary, astonishing book. This is from chapter 19, sort of the introductory chapter. And she's talking about one of the Koch summits where all these billionaires get together and plan strategy and throw money into the pot and that kind of thing. The highlight of the Koch summit in 2009 was, which, by the way, was the year President Obama's first year in office, was an uninhibited debate about what conservatives should do next in the face of their electoral defeat. As the donors and other guests dined in the hotel's banquet room like Roman senators attending a gladiator duel in the forum, they watched a passionate argument unfold that encapsulated the stark choice ahead. Sitting on one side of the stage facing the participants was the Texas Senator John Cornyn, the head of the National Republican Senatorial Committee and former justice on the Texas Supreme Court. Poised on the other side of the moderator was the South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint, a conservative provocateur who defined the outermost anti-establishment fringe of the Republican Party and who, in the words of one admirer, was the leader of the Huns. 57 at the time, he was 5 months older than Cornyn, but his dark hair, lean build, and more casual aw-shucks style made him appear years younger. Before his election to Congress, DeMint had run an advertising agency in South Carolina. He understood how to sell, and what he was pitching that night was an approach to politics that, according to the historian Sean Willits, would have been recognizable to DeMint's forebearers in the Palmetto State as akin to the radical nullification of federal power advocated in the 1860s by the Confederate secessionist John C. Calhoun. The two Republican senators had been at loggerheads for some time. That night, they gave opposing opening statements. Cornyn spoke in favor of the Republican Party fighting its way back to victory by broadening its appeal to a wider swath of voters, including moderates. In contrast, DeMint portrayed compromise as surrender. He had little patience for the slow-moving process of constitutional government. He regarded many of his Senate colleagues as timid and self-serving. The federal government posed such a dire threat to the dynamism of the American economy, in his view, that anything less than all-out war on regulations and spending was a cop-out. DeMint was the face of a new kind of extremism, and he spoke that evening in favor of purifying rather than diluting the Republican Party. He argued that he would rather have 30 Republicans who believed in something than a majority who believed in nothing, a line that was a mantra for him and that brought cheers and applause from the gathered onlookers. Rather than compromising their principles and working with the new administration, the Obama administration, DeMint argued, Republicans needed to take a firm stand against Obama, waging a campaign of massive resistance and obstruction regardless of the 2008 election outcome. Then they go through a discussion about how they debated, the TARP, and DeMint had voted against it, Cornyn for it, and, some of the just issue things. Sitting silently at a table in the front row through all this were Charles Koch and his wife, Liz. No one came to Cornyn's defense. It was widely assumed that the Kochs, as hardcore free market enthusiasts, had opposed the huge government bailouts of the private sector. Later, many reporters assumed this too, ascribing the Kochs' opposition to Obama as stemming from a principled disagreement over issues such as the TARP bailouts. But none of this was true. Had people checked the records, they would have found it quite revealing. At first, the Kochs political organization, Americans for Prosperity, had in fact taken what appeared to be a principled libertarian position against the bank bailouts. But the organization quickly and quietly reversed sides when the bottom began to fall out of the stock market, threatening the Kochs' own vast investment portfolio. The market had begun to collapse on Monday, September 29, when, in the face of heavy opposition from conservatives, the House unexpectedly failed to pass a federal rescue plan. By the end of the day, the Dow Jones Industrial Average had fallen 777 points, losing 6.9% of its value. It was the stock market's largest one-day drop ever. Although some conservative groups and politicians such as DeMint still oppose the bailout, the market panic was enough to change many minds. And among those who flipped during the next 48 hours were the Kochs. But if the Kochs' personal interest in protecting their portfolio had trumped their free market principles, they weren't about to mention it in front of a group full of libertarians whose cash they wanted to combat Obama. Instead, the sentiment among the donors, as the first Koch seminar of the Obama era came to an end, was, as one witness put it, like a bunch of gorillas beating their chests. After hearing both sides out, the assembled guests chose the path of extremism. The Kochs had already concluded that they would need to resort to extraordinary political measures to achieve their goals. A few days before the January 2009 donor seminar, Charles and David Koch had privately weighed their options with their longtime political strategist in a meeting inside the black glass fortress that served as Koch Industries' corporate headquarters in Wichita, Kansas. Advisors to Obama later acknowledged he had no inkling of what he was up against. He had campaigned as a partisan politician who had idealistically taken issue with those who liked to slice and dice our country into red and blue states. His vision, like his own racial blend and geographic heredity, was one of reconciliation, not division. The sentiment was laudable, but alas, wishful thinking. The newly sworn-in president looked down at the ground directly beneath his polished shoes. The book Dark Money by Jane May.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So his name is Tyler Tannehill. He is running as a Republican for Kansas's 2nd Congressional District, if I have this right. And he posts this on Facebook. I'm excited to announce our first AR-15 giveaway. You can earn multiple entries and no purchase is necessary to win. Enter today. It's the great AR-15 giveaway over at Tyler Tannehill for Congress. It's the Twitter handle is apparently at Tannehill for TANNAHILL for Congress. He put this up day before yesterday. People are responding to him with things like, "This is the same tool a man used today to murder a bunch of children. A congressman is raffling off a machine used for mass murdering children." Another one said, "This isn't helping." Another one said, "If you have any decency, you'll take down your AR-15 giveaway on Facebook. Be less tone deaf." And his response, "No, we're going to go forward with this." It's the Bushmaster model. Right. That's what was used in Newtown, too, wasn't it? How sweet. What is it going to take? You look at the situation, you look at what happened in Australia. They solved their problem. You can still own a gun in Australia. You just have to demonstrate that you actually intend to use it. You're not just, "Oh, I think I should have a gun." You know. And they ended these mass killings. We are quite literally the only country in the world that has this problem. Just like we're the only country in the world where if you're the victim of a mass shooting, you probably are going to have to pay your own damn hospital bill. Because we don't have universal health insurance. I'm surprised more people aren't trying to flee the United States. You know, Trump is all hysterical about. Since 1968, we have had more than 1,516,860 people die from guns. 1.5 million people have died from guns in the United States since 1968. Since 1776, 1,300,000 people have died from guns in our wars. Actually, have died, period. Died of all things. Bombs, airplane crashes, everything. More people have died from guns in my lifetime in this country. More people have died from guns than have died in the Revolutionary War, the Mexican War, the Civil War, both Union and Confederate soldiers, the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, the Afghanistan War, the Iraq War, Lebanon War, Grenada War, Panama War, Somalia War, and Haiti War. More people have died from guns in the United States just since 1968 than in all wars in the history of the United States, all the way back to the American Revolution. And you're trying to tell me that the solution to this is, oh, if you see something, say something. And in the meantime, we'll send our thoughts and prayers. But keep that NRI money coming. Incredible. And then we find out that this young man who was the shooter, this from the Daily Beast. Cruz always had his hair short and had a penchant for wearing patriotic shirts that said that, quote, seemed really extreme, like hating on Islam. The suspected gunman would also deride Muslims as terrorists and bombers. A student said, I've seen him wearing a Trump hat. He screamed in class one time. He was upset and started yelling at the teacher. Amazing. Yeah, he shouldn't have had a gun. But if he couldn't have bought an AR-15, like our idiot savant wannabe congressman, Mr. Tyler Tannehill, is giving away on his website if you want to help him become the next congressman from Kansas. If he hadn't had access to a Bushmaster, but the biggest gun he'd been able to buy, you know, had a magazine that held no more than 9 bullets, maybe we wouldn't have 30 plus, what's the word? It's not fatalities, casualties, thank you, which includes, you know, the 17 dead plus all the people wounded. I remember there was a mass shooting in the United States, what, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. We talked about it at length on this program. It was before the election. And say what? Oh, yeah, I think it might have been Pulse. I'm not sure exactly which one it was, but in fact, no, it wasn't. It was a school shooting, and 30 kids were shot, and the exact same number of kids, or roughly the same number of kids, were knifed in China by a crazed guy who ran into a classroom. However, in China, none of the children died. In the United States, all of them died. Oh, this is interesting. The ADL, ADL.org, in their blog, the headline, Florida white supremacist group admits ties to alleged Parkland school shooter Nicholas Cruz. A spokesman for the white supremacist group Republic of Florida told the Anti-Defamation League on Thursday, that's today, that Nicholas Cruz, the man charged with the previous day's deadly shooting spree at Parkland, Florida Hospital, was associated with his group. After self-described Republic of Florida members, this is the white supremacist group in Florida, claimed on the discussion forum 4chan that Cruz had also been a member, the Anti-Defamation League called the ROF hotline and spoke with an ROF member who identified himself as Jordan Jareb. Jareb, based in Tallahassee, is believed to be the leader of the ROF. In 2016, he was arrested on charges of threatening a staffer in the office of Florida Governor Rick Scott because he was allegedly angry at the staffer's son. Jareb said that Cruz was associated with the ROF, having been brought up by another member. Jareb said that Cruz had participated in one or more Republic of Florida training exercises in the Tallahassee area, carpooling with other ROF members from South Florida. The alt-right white supremacist group borrows paramilitary concepts from the anti-government extremist militia movement, which is not in and of itself a white supremacist movement. ROF describes itself as, quote, a white civil rights organization fighting for white identitarian politics and seeks to create, quote, a white ethno-state in Florida, end quote. So if Cruz's role is confirmed, they write, the Parkland school shooting would be the second school shooting by a white supremacist in the past 2 months. There was a shooting spree in a high school in northwest New Mexico, killing 2 students just a few months ago in December by a young man named William Atchison who killed himself after killing these people. White supremacists, armed white supremacists, mentally ill white supremacists, and I think by those words, it's almost a redundancy. Those words very much go together. Charlie in Poles, oh, hang on, Charlie. I'm going to hit a break here in just a second. I don't want to do that to you. 14, yeah, I've got 20 seconds. I'll pick you up on the other side of the break. But here, we pussyfoot around this stuff. We tiptoe around it. In 2009, the FBI releases a report about white right-wing extremism in the United States. Fox News has a hissy fit. Right-wing hate radio goes into hysterics, and the Obama administration and the FBI pull the report and destroy it. You have a member of a white supremacist group in Florida shooting up a school yesterday, if the white supremacist group's report is accurate, and the Anti-Defamation League's report is accurate, and the press doesn't even want to talk about it. Oh, we can't talk about white supremacism. We can't talk about the guy wearing the Make America Great hat shooting up the school. Oh, no. We're not going to do that. And we can't talk about assault weapon bans. We can't talk about gun buybacks. No, we got to talk about mental illness. Give me a break.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is such an exercise in cowardice by our politicians and our media. It's cowardice. And welcome back. Meredith in Walsenburg, Colorado. Am I saying that right, Meredith?
Yes, that's right.
So you are represented by Cory Gardner, who took like, what, $4 million from the NRA in the last election cycle?
Yeah,
$3.879 million.
Actually, he's helping us with the marijuana thing.
Yeah.
But other than that, he's not very much help at all.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that a friend of mine pointed out a huge problem, and that is that every time there's a big shooting like this and they publicize it, people go to the gun stores or wherever and buy more guns and more ammunition because they're afraid of the people banning the guns.
Right.
Excuse me.
And they're also afraid of all the other people who have guns. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a spiral of death.
Right, and the problem is that gives a lot of money to the gun manufacturers, and that would give even less incentive to the politicians to stop it.
Yep. And as long as the gun manufacturers keep shoveling money into the NRA and the NRA keeps shoveling that money to Republican politicians, this situation is not going to change. We are seeing one single hard-right interest group whose main purpose for existence is to sell weapons, to make profits for the armaments industry, which is closely tied into the military-industrial complex. One organization has turned America into a slaughterhouse.
Right.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Meredith, very well said. Thank you for the call. It's nice to hear from you, and thank you for watching us there in Colorado. Michael in Imperial Beach, California. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Mr. Hartman. Okay. You've often told us about the Libertarian Party platform that one of the Koch brothers ran for VP in 1980.
Right.
And one of their goals was to eliminate all funding of public education.
Correct.
Which to me seems like it would help the private industry, school industry.
Of course.
So, with Betsy DeVos being our Secretary of Education, and she's pushing for the charter schools, now, do they sell stocks? Are charter schools on the stock market, the companies that own charter schools?
I don't know. There's a lot of for-profit ones, though, and whether I just don't know if any of them have done an IPO, if they've jumped through all the hoops in order to be publicly traded. I suspect that they're getting plenty of financing from their billionaire buddies. This is the hot new thing among libertarian billionaires in Silicon Valley.
Correct. So every time one of these public school shootings happens, doesn't that make them look more safe than public schools? And wouldn't that help them financially big time?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Okay, when all these public school shootings happen in public schools, I don't think any of them been in charter schools. Doesn't that make them look like that's the better choice, and the libertarians could do their goal of destroying public education?
I doubt it. I think, though, that the NRA has benefited by school shootings when you get pundits going on television promoting the idea that to solve this problem, we need to have armed guards in our schools. So we need more guns to stop the guns that the NRA has been pouring into our society since the 80s, basically. It's crazy. Michael, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Scott in Canaan, Maine. It says here you want to disagree with me, so you go to the top of the list. What's up?
Well, I don't know if I want to disagree with you, Tom, but I think...
Is this a new scam to get at the top of the list? Come on, Scott.
How you doing, Tom?
I'm fine. What's on your mind?
Listen, the NRA, you're pushing that NRA thing, and I get it. You know, I know what you're saying there.
I was a member of the NRA for years, Scott. It used to be an organization
that... Let me talk or what? You know, the last time I did this, you shut me off before I got to make my point.
Okay, make your point, Scott.
So you have to look at the base reasons why people are buying guns. The NRA is not making people buy guns. Did you just shut me off again?
No, I'm listening.
Every time you talk, my microphone goes down.
I am listening.
The NRA is not making people buy guns. You have to look at the base reason why people are buying guns. For the most part, the people I know, they're worried about the cops. They're worried about their government becoming a repressive government. And again, I want to drag you back to the NDAA of 2012 that Obama fought so hard to put in. He literally fought to get it in for the military to come onto the streets and shoot citizens. That's a lot of the reason people buy guns. It's
Scott,
not
just as a real simple question here for you. I heard what you said. I heard what you said. I gave you plenty of time. Scott, I got a simple question for you. Can you please identify for me one instance in my lifetime, in the recent history of the United States, when a citizen or a group of citizens with guns successfully backed off a police department or a military?
The Bundy Ranch. All right, you going to let me finish?
Sure.
Yeah, the Bundy Ranch backed him right off, you know, and that's it. Listen, I communicate a lot with people in Australia. Getting rid of their guns was one of the worst things that the people I talked to ever did.
So you think that the Bundy Ranch is the model for how Americans should be? That when you are stealing from the government, and Clive and Bundy had stolen well over $1 million from the government and refused to pay it. When you are stealing from the government and the government shows up and says, "Okay, you complain about me talking over you. I'm over it. I'm sorry." Denise, excuse me, in Chicago. Hey, Denise, what's on your mind today? Denise? You got to listen to your telephone, not your radio. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Yeah, hi. I still can't get over this silencer business. I mean, deer can hear pretty well, and if they see a deer drop in front of them, they're going to run away.
Yeah.
If they want a silencer, go out and get a bow and arrow.
Yeah, exactly.
At least you can't kill yourself with a bow and arrow.
Or it's harder.
I don't know why they don't promote archery more. I enjoy that. Anyway,
it's not so much profit in it. A really high quality bow and arrow is a couple $100. A really good gun is $1,000.
Right, but a bow and arrow is, such a Zen-like thing with breathing and everything.
Yeah.
And
no, it's an actual skill.
Yeah. Anyway, as far as gun control was, I mean, there were around 33,000 gun deaths last year in the United States,
right.
And there's around 330 million Americans, so that's like 1 in 10,000.
That's 1%,
right?
isn't it? Or 1/10? No, that's 1/100th of a percent.
Right.
Yeah.
In New York City, there were 233 gun deaths last year out of 8.5 million people. That's 1 in 8. That's 1 in 38,000.
So that's a lower percentage.
On the New York streets. What's that?
So that's a lower percentage than the national average?
About 4 times, yeah.
So it's safer in New York City than in rural America?
Even if Trump is on Fifth Avenue with a gun, it's still safer in New York City.
Yeah, there you go.
You know.
Incredible. Yeah, and
Right.
New York City has one of the most stringent gun laws in the United States. So surprise, surprise, they have 1/4 of the gun deaths of the rest of the United States.
Right, and we don't have Indiana next door.
Yeah,
So,
which is the
we have
problem that
Virginia,
Chicago
but that's
has.
further away.
Yeah, you literally
Virginia's
have gun shops right on the Indiana border specifically to sell to people who want to just carry those guns into Chicago. Excellent point, Bill. Excellent, excellent point. Thank you for calling and making it. Larry in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or California. Hey, Larry, what's up?
It's on what one gun law would have prevented this from happening?
If we had maintained the assault weapons ban that Ronald Reagan campaigned for, you would not be able to buy. I beg your pardon?
That all he had to do was carry 4 9mm pistols in there, and he could have fired off 40 shots easily.
Yeah, but he fired a hell of a lot more than 40 shots, number one. And number two, 4 pistols is a whole lot harder to carry around than 1 Bushmaster or 1 AR-15.
No, it's not. It's a lot easier to conceal and hide than carry a rifle.
Well, perhaps. Then Larry, if you want to get into this thought experiment, if we were to combine banning weapons of war with banning any kind of weapon that is semi-automatic. Actually, let's not even go that far. Let's just really make it simple. Let's just say that in order to buy and own a weapon, a gun, you have to do 3 simple things, the exact same things you have to do in order to buy and drive a car. You have to, the weapon has to be registered from the time of manufacture until the time of destruction. You have to have a license proving that you are capable and proficient of using that weapon, certified by an actual, just like getting your driver's license. And number 3, you have to have liability insurance. Why is it that those kids who were killed yesterday in this high school in Florida, why is it that if they had been hit by a drunk driver, if this guy, or not even a drunk driver, a malicious driver, if this guy had used his car to mow them down rather than a gun to mow them down, Geico would be paying $1 million to each one of the families, because you're required, if you own a car, to have liability insurance, because cars can kill people. Guns are designed to kill people, and we don't require liability insurance. I'm betting, Larry, that if this guy had to go through had to go through the equivalent of a driver's license test and had to have insurance, had to have liability insurance, and the gun was registered in a way that was relatively public, and he wasn't able to get an AR-15, I'm guessing this wouldn't have happened. But that doesn't include the fact that the probability, according to the Anti-Defamation League, that he was also part of a white supremacist group in Florida.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back. Stick around. In the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading from American Holocaust by David Stannard, The Conquest of the New World. This is from the prologue. Just 21 years after Columbus's first landing in the Caribbean, the vastly populous island that the explorer had renamed Hispaniola was effectively desolate. Nearly 8 million people, those Columbus chose to call Indians, had been killed by violence, disease, and despair. It took a little longer, about the span of a single human generation, but what happened on Hispaniola was the equivalent of more than 50 Hiroshimas, and Hispaniola was only the beginning. Within no more than a handful of generations following their first encounters with Europeans, the vast majority of the Western Hemisphere's native peoples had been exterminated. The pace and magnitude of their obliteration varied from place to place and from time to time, but for years, now historical demographers have been uncovering in region upon region post-Columbia depopulation rates of between 90 and 98%, with such regularity that an overall decline of 95% in Native American population has become a working rule of thumb. What this means is that, on average, for every 20 natives alive at the moment of European contact, when the lands of the Americans teemed with numerous tens of millions of people, only one stood in their place when the bloodbath was over. To put this in a contemporary context, the ratio of native survivorship in the Americas following European contact was less than half of what the human survivorship ratio would be in the United States today if every single white person and every single black person died. The destruction of the Indians of the Americas was far and away the most massive act of genocide in the history of the world. That is why, as one historian aptly has said, far from the heroic and romantic heraldry that customarily is used to symbolize the European settlement of the Americas, the emblem most congruent with reality would be a pyramid of skulls. Scholars estimate the size of the post-Columbian Holocaust have climbed sharply in recent decades. Too often, however, academic discussions of this ghastly event have reduced the devastated indigenous people and their cultures to statistical calculations in reconciling demographic analyses. It was easy for this to happen. From the very beginning, merely taking the account of so mammoth a cataclysm seemed an impossible task. Wrote one Spanish adventurer who arrived in the New World only 2 decades after Columbus's first landing, and who himself openly reveled in the torrent of native blood. There was neither, quote, paper nor time enough to tell all that the conquistadors did to ruin the Indians and rob them and destroy the land, end quote. As a result, the very effort to describe the disaster's overwhelming magnitude has tended to obliterate both the writer's and the reader's sense of its truly horrific human element. In an apparent effort to counteract this tendency, one writer, Tsvetsan Todorov, began his study of the events of 1492 and immediately thereafter with an epigraph from Diego de Landa's Relación de las Casas de Yucatán. Quote, the captain, Alonso Lopez de Avila, brother-in-law of the Adelmento de Montejo, captured during the war in Bacalan a young Indian woman of lovely and gracious appearance. She had promised her husband, fearful lest they should kill him in the war, not to have relations with any other man but him, and so no persuasion was sufficient to prevent her from taking her own life to avoid being defiled by another man. And because of this, they had her thrown to the dogs. Toborov then dedicates his book to the memory of a Mayan woman devoured by dogs. It is important to try and hold in mind an image of that woman and her brothers and sisters and the innumerable others who suffered similar fates as one reads Todorov's book, or this one, or any other work on this subject, just as it is essential, as one reads about the Jewish Holocaust or the horrors of the African slave trade, to keep in mind the treasure of a single life in order to avoid becoming emotionally anesthetized by the sheer force of such overwhelming human evil and destruction. There is, for example, the case of a small Indian boy whose name no one knows today, and whose unmarked skeletal remains are hopelessly intermingled with those of hundreds of anonymous others in a mass grave on the American plains, but a boy who once played on the banks of a quiet creek in eastern Colorado, until the morning in 1864, when the American soldiers came. Then, as one of the cavalrymen later told it, while his compatriots were slaughtering and mutilating the bodies of all the women and all of the children they could catch, he spotted the boy trying to flee. Quote, there was one child, probably 3 years old, just big enough to walk through the sand. The Indians had gone ahead and this little child was behind following after them. The little fellow was perfectly naked, traveling on the sand. I saw one man get off his horse at a distance of about 75 yards and drop his rifle and fire, but he missed the child. Another man came up and said, let me try the son of a bitch, I can hit him. He got down off his horse, kneeled down and fired at the little child, but he missed him too. A third man came up and made a similar remark and fired, and the little fellow dropped. We must do what we can to recapture and try to understand in human terms what it was that was crushed, what it was that was butchered. It is not enough merely to acknowledge that much was lost. So close to total was the human incineration and carnage. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Dr. Michael Hudson is on the line with us. He is the economist and president of the Institute for the Study of Long-Term Economic Trends, ISLET, distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri at Kansas City, the author most recently of J is for Junk Economics, his website michael-hudson.com, spelled the way you would expect. And Michael, A, welcome back to the program, and B, I understand you have a new book coming out soon.
Well, it won't be too soon. It's going to be in April or May, and it will be on a history of debt cancellations from the ancient Near East, from Babylonia to the biblical lands.
I would love to see that. When that book comes out, please make sure we have a copy. I'd like to get you on. I'd like to read it, and we'll talk about it. You can be sure
it's taken about 30 years to write it.
I can imagine. So, Dr. Michael Hudson, the economics of guns in the United States, mass shootings, is, as an economist, how do you view what happened yesterday and the larger zeitgeist, the fact that the United States, we have lost more people to gun violence just since 1968 than in all wars from the Revolutionary War to today, that we have lost more people in the last 2 years to gun violence than all the young men and women who died in Vietnam, at least Americans. How does an economist look at this?
I don't think economists do look at it. I mean, what can you say? I used to make some money being an expert witness in courts where the government publishes the value of a human life according to life expectancy and the time of premature death, the time of death, and they take the discounted earnings that what you're expected by gender, race, and age over time. So it's very easy to quantify this by looking at the Census Department and Commerce Department statistics that insurance company lawyers and people suing insurance companies use all the time. Obviously, it would be a very high cost, thousands of times what the Gun Association gives to Mr. Trump. I think it was $208,000.
Well, they gave him $15 million in the 2016 election.
Well, that's nowhere near as much as the government actuarial tables say the value of the lost lives is. So obviously, it's not an economic choice. Americans like to shoot each other. It's a choice. And it may not be an economic choice, but that's the free democracy market. You get what you get the politicians you buy.
Yeah, well, the other thing we know is that if you have a gun in the house, the probability of somebody in that house committing suicide with that gun goes up over 500%. And
well, that's very important.
About half of all these gun deaths are suicides.
Well, right now we're going into a slow depression, and when you have economic conditions like they are in the United States, the suicide rates go up, as they did in Greece, Latvia, as they did in Russia when there's a meltdown. So I think you can expect an increase in suicides, especially in the Midwest Rust Belt, as industry fails to take off and the economy worsens.
So, well, that's interesting. You just said that we're in a slow motion depression, or we're sliding into a depression, and yet the Republicans and the president just spent, actually, just for backstory, for perspective, when we were in the crisis of 2008 and we were losing 700,000 jobs every single month, Barack Obama petitioned Congress to go along with him and stimulate the economy to get us out of that. The stimulus that they came up with, correct my numbers if I'm wrong on this, but I think it was something in the neighborhood of $800 billion, less than $1 trillion, and about a third of that was just tax cuts. So the actual stimulus was around $500 million. The Republicans just passed a $5 trillion stimulus. $1.5 trillion of that is going to be put on our national credit card, and that, it seems, would juice the economy like crazy. I mean, I'm reading pieces in the Financial Times and whatnot where people are saying, you know, we're 9 years into this boom cycle. It should be ending but they just poured gasoline on the fire. They just cranked the economy. So probably the stock market's going to continue to rise for the year or so. What does all that mean, and what does that mean for the average person, Michael Hudson?
It means that the $5 trillion is, the Republicans have bailed out the stock market, not the economy. The stock market isn't the economy. The economy has not grown since 2008, although Mr. Obama did give $4.3 trillion to the Federal Reserve to pump into Wall Street. And that's much more than he provided to the economy. He broke his campaign promises, left the debts in place, and we're still suffering from the debt deflation that's left over from the failure to cancel the debts, the mortgage debts, the junk mortgage debts, and other
student loan debts
from 2008. So the economy for the 99% of the people haven't recovered. And there are statistics that the Commerce Department, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and the Federal Reserve show that for the 95% of the population, the economy is 3% lower now than it was in 2008. And there really hasn't been a recovery in jobs. The seeming recovery is part-time jobs and jobs with no health insurance, with no coverage. So the job situation is now also much worse than the media lent on. But I guess the big point is the stock market is going up because the economy is shrinking. It's going up because corporations are not using the profits that they're going to be getting tax-free to invest in more equipment or hire more labor. What they're doing is buying their own stock and raising their dividend payouts and buying other companies. So all of this frenetic activity is within the financial sector, not within the production and consumption economy that actually employs people.
Is that why we are sliding into a slow motion depression?
Yes.
So how does this work? How do you expect this to play out? And how long can the stock market continue to rise?
The stock market can continue to rise as long as the Federal Reserve comes in and bails it out. Essentially, it's a very technical answer. It buys Standard & Poor futures in the market, and just like the Federal Reserve controls interest rates and bond prices and the exchange rate, they're controlling stock prices to support it. It's artificially supported.
Wait a minute. I didn't know this. I know that the Fed, through quantitative easing, they'd been buying treasuries as a way of, and corporate debt for that matter, as a way of getting bad debt off the books and throwing cash into the system. I had no idea they were buying futures in the S&P.
They don't even have to buy futures. They put in the bids. Paul Craig Roberts and I have been writing articles on this in the last week. You could see it very clearly last week when the stock market began to plunge. Already, something called the Plunge Protection Team that was put in place with George W.
Oh, that's right, the PTT, yes.
Bush. Yeah, is in. The Plunge Protection Team artificially stops any decline by coming in and buying the future, offering a high price for the futures. So all of a sudden, although the prices are going down, speculators and computerized programs can buy the existing stocks to sell and turn over in the future to whoever is on the other side, the Fed or whomever, and then the Fed can
So
dump it.
Futures are just bets that expire, right? So the Fed is buying futures and then just, letting that money evaporate?
Expire or you have to deliver, and somebody has to pick up, and somebody may be losing very heavily here. I think the investment banks on Wall Street that are actually implementing these hope to put all the bad bets on the side of their customers, mainly the pension funds. So the idea is when the stock market plunges, to leave the pension funds and the mutual funds and the small investors holding the bag. It's a gimmick market, just like the gold and the bond market, and almost all the financial markets are now managed. It's not exactly the free enterprise economy that their patter talk describes.
That's incredible. I knew about the plunge protection teams. I'd reported on it, but that was like, 6, 8. Well, that was more like 10 years ago.
Well, it's back in business.
Yeah, they're back in business, and
you could see it last week twice on both declines. I was in Washington with statisticians, and we were all watching it and chuckling over it.
So the bottom line here is that big investors. I mean, I read this on the air yesterday. The Financial Times had a piece about how how Goldman Sachs and Fidelity and some of these other companies that trade stocks on behalf of investors are seeing 15, 20, 25% increases in their profits over the last quarter, or over this quarter rather, because of the volatility in the market. Because they don't care if the market goes up or down, as long as people are buying and selling stocks frantically, both. They make a commission on every stock sale, and so they're just like pigs in slop. They're having a great time.
Well, most of the stocks are sold by companies that don't have to pay commissions. It's all sold by brokerage companies, by banks that have their own brokerage companies and their own traders. So they don't have to pay any commission at all, and they do it by electronic, instantaneously computer programs.
Right. So the way they've set this system up is that if you are a small investor, if you've got $10,000 in your IRA, or if you've got $10 million in your IRA. Well, 10 million, you're not a small investor anymore. You probably have professional, management. But a couple $100,000 in your IRA, whatever it may be, you're going to be screwed. If you're a pension fund, you're going to be screwed. If you're a state who's got pension funds and money, you're going to be screwed. This is a strong incentive for states to open their own banks, I would think, number one. But number two, does this really mean that the big houses, Goldman Sachs, that they're never going to get burned again?
The Fed has promised to bail them out and do whatever it takes. The Fed says that if the large banks go under, they will drag down the pension fund. So the Fed's principle is only save the rich. The rich alone can save us. And yes, unless you have $1 billion in your portfolio, you don't belong in the market, because you have to be strong enough to make the market and manipulate it, or else you'll be manipulated.
Amazing. Dr. Michael Hudson. Michael-Hudson.com is the website. Hang on just a second.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Distinguished Research Professor of Economics. J is for Junk Economics is his most recent work. Dr. Hudson, thank you.
It's good to be here, Tom.
Good talking with you. Welcome back. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Well, I just want to talk about economics a little bit. I got some positive thing. I've been pestering, or lobbying rather, my state legislator. I went to 2 town halls, and I got a call from his assistant, one of his assistants yesterday. They're going to try to bill for a state bank in California before the legislator, by the deadline is the 16th, Friday. So
you're gonna run for state representative?
No, I'm pushing my state legislator.
Oh, I see.
Bill Ting, to get this on the docket, or whatever you want to call it.
Oh, I missed something. I missed a word there. Thank you, Jeff.
So so they're putting it on. She said they're going to try to put it on the bill. She said no promises. By Friday, the deadline 16th for bills in California state legislators. So,
cool.
So if you're frustrated out there, get active, and something might happen there. And so, I went to town halls and I gave them some bills, and I've been emailing her examples of the 2011 bill for a state bank, AB 750, that didn't go through. I guess Jerry Brown didn't sign it, so he's moonbeam for some reason. And if, like I said, people need to, get around a, issue and, push hard on it.
Yeah,
so,
become a citizen lobbyist. Excellent point. Thank you very much, Jeff. Kirk in Ukiah, California. Hey, Kirk, what's on your mind today?
Well, hey, thanks for taking my call.
Kirk, I can hardly hear you. Is your thumb over the microphone or something?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, just speak loudly, please.
Yeah, okay. To answer your last caller's question real quick, this is a little off my original subject, but Jerry Brown was called Governor Moonbeam because his old girlfriend, Linda Ronstadt, told a story to a Chicago Tribune op-ed fellow, I can't remember his name, that he wanted to... after the 1970 fires in Southern California, as part of FireScope at the time, wanted to have satellite communications for emergency services. And that's how he got the nickname Governor Moonbeam.
Well, that's a perfectly rational thing to have satellite communications. So your cell towers are down, you're screwed.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. So anyway, that answers that fellow's question. But what I called about was I totally agree with your idea about insuring weapons. I think that's the way to do it. And one thing I don't think you've covered in that regard, motor vehicles are taxed.
Yes, you're right.
And part of that tax money goes towards making vehicles and roads safer.
You're right. And guns are taxed, but they're just taxed as normal sales tax. And in states that don't have sales tax, like Oregon, there's no tax on the guns. So having a special tax like the gas tax, for example, that goes to roads would be a good idea. That's a good one.
That's my point. My point exactly, and that's all I wanted to contribute to your discussion.
Well, and especially now that the Republicans actually passed a law forbidding the Centers for Disease Control or any federal agency from doing any sort of research on gun violence in the United States, that could be funded by this tax you're talking about. Obviously, it's not going to happen under a sellout Republican administration, a billionaire-owned Republican administration. But I think when the Democrats get back into power, it's something we should be talking about. Kirk, thank you very much for the call. Great to hear from you. We'll be right back.
As tyrants take control of democracies, they typically do 7 things. Number 1, they exaggerate their mandate to govern, claiming, for example, that they won an election by a landslide, even after losing the popular vote. Criticize any finding that they or co-conspirators stole the election, and repeatedly claim massive voter fraud in the absence of any evidence, in order to have an excuse to restrict voting by opponents in subsequent elections. Number 2, they turn the public against journalists or media outlets that criticize them, calling them deceitful and scum, holding few, if any, press conferences. Instead, they communicate with the public directly through mass rallies and unfiltered statements. Number 3, they repeatedly lie to the public, causing the public to doubt the truth and to believe fictions that support the tyrant's goals. Fourth,
welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. On the line with us, the author of Sideswiped, the book about how Washington, D.C. really works. It'll curl your hair and or straighten it, as the case may be. It'll reverse whatever you're experiencing. Bob Ney is with us. Congressman, welcome back.
Thank you. Or in my case, it will gray your hair.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. So what's up?
Well, of course, the tragic shooting, and then we're beginning to cover, finding out some things. And this, shooter is alive, so I'm sure they'll find out more than in some of the cases where the killer's been killed themselves or have killed themselves. So, some information is coming out, but one of the, and I'll get to the gun part in a second of some of the comments, but one of the things that's, to be debatable what you do about something, but as we've read these reports, Tom, it tells people if you see something, speak about it, talk about it. But in this case, we're finding out that 6 months ago there were warnings to the FBI. This guy was on YouTube and social media, very, very vocal, very pointed, actually mentioning, the assault weapon he was going to use. So I think there might be a broader debate about, how things are handled, once people do speak up, especially.
Well, I think this is just the most vicious placebo out there, Bob. New York City gets last year got over 20,000 see something, say something calls. The number of people who were prosecuted for terrorism as a result of that, 0. The Washington D.C. Metro gets around 18,000 calls a year. The number of people prosecuted for terrorism as a result, 0. This is just another placebo. It's just like saying thoughts and prayers. What we need is gun control. It's just real simple. You know, we need to have a debate about exactly what that gun control should look like, but that's what we need, in my opinion. I'm just over it with all these placebos. And not only that, did you see this thing? The Anti-Defamation League just published a piece on their website, adl.org, that this young man, Mr. Cruz, was a member of the Republic of Florida, which is a white supremacist group in Florida, and he was fond of wearing "Make America Great Again" hats.
No, I did not. I haven't seen that report yet. But I did want to mention it because, you know, they stress so much to report and, you know, what you see. And I agree with you. I mean, in this case, I don't know what more could have been done unless somebody stood in front of the FBI and screamed it with a loudspeaker.
Well, but the FBI investigated it. And they said, you know, we can't do anything. He hasn't committed a crime.
Right.
Yeah, this is the problem that people have when they report domestic abuse. You know, if they don't have proof of it, you know, what are the police going to do?
Problem. And Nancy Pelosi has called on Speaker Ryan to have some type of vote on gun violence. I'm sure that there might be a mention also of mental health and mental health issues that might possibly come up. I don't know. You know what the final will be on it, because there's a comprehensive.
But we're not the only country in the world that has crazy people, Bob. But we are the only country in the world that is awash. We have more guns than people.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon
there's no question there's also no question that, you know, something's happened. I mean, with the violence and the way it interacts and the violence and the way it's carried out. There's no question. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine not too long ago. I mean, it's unbelievable here.
Yeah.
Compared to the
well, we just had economist Michael Hudson on, and he pointed out that for 95% of Americans, the economy is actually about 3% worse than it was in 2008. That despair is spreading across the country, that the middle class is being devastated. Yes, the stock market is up. Yes, the top 5% are richer than they've ever been, but the rest of us are screwed. And people are figuring it out. And despair translates into things like, you know, killing people and suicides. He said, you know, suicides are up, and they're going to continue going up as a result of this. And of course, about half of gun deaths are suicide deaths. But we've had, in the last 2 years, more people have died in the United States from guns than died in all of Vietnam. Since 1968, more people have died in the United States from guns than died in all wars the United States has fought from the Revolutionary War to today.
Plus the school shootings just this year.
Yeah, 18 of them so far this year, and we're in the middle of February, for God's sake.
Right. I did want to mention, before we run out of time, about the immigration issue.
Sure.
There is a great bipartisan bill that's been put together. They're calling it the Gang of 22, but there were 8, at the last count, there were 8 Republicans, 8 Democratic members, and an independent. But I think there's 2 more that went on to the bill. The president is threatening a veto. He is saying that with the White House and Homeland Security, Tom, is saying that it will make a national sanctuary city. But in actuality, the bill will, you know, take care of the Dreamers as a process, you know, to be taken through in a thoughtful process. As far as the president's threat to veto it, I would assume that with this many people, they will take it forward. And then if he so chooses to veto it, if it makes it through the House, you know, he will. But McConnell has opened the door now to get a bill, and just having served there, if they don't come together with a bill, this may be one of the last opportunities, probably this year, you know, to be able to do that.
Incredible.
So, I mean, I think it's, you know, an important time to do it. And otherwise, they're, you know, wrangling with the March 23rd deadline coming up of the, quote, budget process, which, you know, of course, is taking care of this year's budget and the next fiscal year's budget.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how this all goes. And this is the budget with the hundreds of billions of dollars in cuts to Medicare, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Jeez, these guys are incorrigible. Bob Ney, thank you, Congressman.
Okay, thank you.
Check out his book, Sideswiped. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten thinks Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study. It's the outcome you want.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Mike Papantonio, America's lawyer, the attorney, host of Ring of Fire Radio, author of the new legal thriller Law and Vengeance, a sequel to his first Law and Disorder. And these are, by the way, if you like reading, John Grisham-style novels, legal thrillers, these are brilliant. Mike Papantonio is with us. Ring of Fire, you can tweet him at Ring of Fire Radio or at Levin Papantonio. Pap, welcome back to the program.
Good to be here, Tom.
It's been too long. So
it has been. I kind of got lost there.
Yeah, I'm curious your thoughts. Obviously the story of the day is the millions and millions of dollars that these Republican senators from Cory Gardner on down have been taking from the NRA just in the last election cycle. In fact, $2, $3, $4, or $5 million. Some of these guys. And their unwillingness to say anything other than, oh, mental illness or, oh, thoughts and prayers. What, as a lawyer, what is your perspective on what is going on here with this?
Well, the integral part of what you're describing there is that we don't see the news about these truth-telling symposiums that the NRA and the gun manufacturers hold for these politicians all over places like Las Vegas, Hawaii, exotic vacations. That's really what it is. If you look at the agendas on some of these things, it mostly involves alcohol and parties, and every now and then they'll talk about some intellectual reason why, in their sense, an intellectual reason why we should stand strong and allow there really to be little or no laws where it comes to guns. It's so difficult to overcome, Tom, because there's so much money involved. And then on top of that, add to it that we used to have kind of good news reporting that they would show up at these secret symposiums that these characters go to. But when you go to one of them, I mean, you kind of clearly understand they're captured. You don't talk logic after they're so indoctrinated by this by these companies, and the indoctrination has nothing to do with logic. It has everything to do with money. So I mean, that's what we're up against. The only thing that you can do is shine light on it, and we're not really in an environment, a media environment that's very good at shining light anymore. The light typically is focused in one or two areas, and they seem incapable of broadening that search.
Well, if the NRA was laundering tens of millions of dollars from Russian billionaire oligarchs for the Trump campaign and the Republican Party, and they put something like $400 million into the last election, I mean, you know, that's real money. And you just have to ask, you know, how is what they're doing consequentially different from what the tobacco industry was doing, and at what point might guys like you decide to go after the weapons manufacturers who are you know, destroying this country?
Well, we're not afraid. I mean, you know, as you know, my firm handled the tobacco case. We're one of the lead firms in the the national opioid litigation. BP. We take on the big cases. The only reason we can't move into this area is because Congress has created so many immunities for the industry. As a matter of fact, this book that you're talking about, Law and Vengeance, that's the focus. It's about a whistleblower who wants to uncover what's been happening in the weapons industry. And the unfortunate thing is that the government has already gotten involved, and in exchange for the money that they've been given, these congressmen, in exchange for the money, they've written laws that provide almost total immunity to the gun industry. So that's the only thing. The only thing we're going to have is a possibility of taking that immunity away, and show that the gun industry there's so many criminal aspects of what they do, whether it's the distribution, whether it's the way they spread money around. So I think we'd be able to make out a pretty good RICO case. But unfortunately, Congress has been paid so much money that they've made the industry basically immune.
Wow. We're talking with America's lawyer, Mike Papantonio. Is there any effort by anybody to undo that I could highlight on this program?
Of course. Well, yeah, I mean, Perry Whites is a dear friend of mine who initiated the case against the gun industry, and he focused on a couple of particular brands that were just nothing. They simply were there as killing as equipment for killing. That's what they were there for. And he had articulated a very, very good case, and the case was dismissed. But he wanted to launch the process there. And then after that case, after there was a series of cases that were filed right after that, there was this huge flurry within the gun industry. Money was spread around in a very big way, and no attorney has been willing to say, well, let me try this again, because it's going to be dismissed. I mean, unless there's something very unique about the case is going to be dismissed. There are a couple of cases, the Remington case, for example, that still can be litigated, but it's a different analysis. That has to do with a defect in the design, which is a totally different analysis than what Perry White's had in his first lawsuit.
Would it not be possible, now that we have smart gun technology, where if you're not wearing a chip somewhere, you know, in your watch or on your belt or something, the gun won't fire? Or guns that recognize your fingerprints, things like this. I mean, you know, we do this with smartphones, you know, and we can do this with guns. Isn't it possible to argue that all technology is defective?
Well, the point is, if we weren't faced with this immunity, and it's almost a total immunity, if we weren't faced with that, we would be able to put experts on the stand that could show how many ways all of this could be prevented, and any jury listening to the facts would overwhelmingly find that the case has merit, and they would probably find in favor of of a Perry White's kind of case. But unfortunately, I can tell you, we've looked at it many different ways. And until you can get them in court, because government won't do anything about it, the media has done very little about it. Right. When things change, it has to be a cultural change, and usually that happens in a civil courtroom with a civil trial lawyer hammering a company and making them pay out, you know, billions of dollars because of their wrong conduct.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're engaged in a lawsuit against, I believe, Purdue Pharma, the manufacturers of OxyContin.
Right. My focus in the lawsuit really is against the distributors, Tom. There's been so much attention that's been paid to the manufacturers, but the distributors are really the drug pushers. Once you start seeing the facts of the case, you'll conclude that there's really no difference between what these corporate drug pushers did and what we see come from the drug lords south of the border. It's exactly the same kind of setup in so many ways. The only difference in the United States is the government sanctions this legal drug business. Right. And every day we get new information and new expert testimony and new documents that are going to show that the best way to look at this, you've seen those mobster movies where they have what they call a RICO schematic, and that is who's at the top of the chain, and then they'll have a line going down to the next picture, and then that line goes down to 3 more pictures. That's exactly how this whole thing has been set up. And there again, Congress helped accomplish this. The FDA helped accomplish this. The DEA helped accomplish this. We can't even get the DEA to give us, and this is in federal court, and the judge has issued a subpoena. And we can't get the DEA to hand over the documents that show which parts of the country were dumping grounds for the opioid distributors. Wow. That's how powerful this industry is. So we're going to have to fight the DEA. We may have to fight Congress just to get the raw data about what was the areas where this dumping took place.
That's absolutely breathtaking. America's lawyer, Mike Papantonio. Check out his new book, Law and Vengeance, and it's a sequel to Law and Disorder. They're both brilliant. The website, TRO Fired, as in the Ring of Fire, trofire.com. You can tweet him at Ring of Fire Radio. Pap, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom.
Look forward to talking to you again soon. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day, your calls, my thoughts on all of the above right after this. Welcome back. Bill in Linwood, Washington. Hey, Bill, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
You know, the NRA was responsible for providing this kid with the tool to do what he did, but I think the media is not taking credit for providing the incentive for him to do it. And the media needs to just not give these people a multi-million-dollar platform that consumes all the news to promote their...
What incentive are you talking about, Bill?
Well, this sociopathic, maladjusted teenager has now been on the news on every channel.
Oh, you're talking about hey, kill a bunch of people, you get to be famous.
Yeah, blaze of glory type of thing.
Right.
And that's the only disincentive I see to the lone wolf attacks is the national media just agreeing to give it its coverage it's due, put it on the back burner, let the local news cover it from there on out.
Or to just as a matter of policy, and I was really pleased this morning, Stephanie Rule on MSNBC, she said, I'm not going to use this man's name anymore. He's already gotten enough publicity. And if they just all, I mean, it doesn't even require legislation. It would just be a common code of ethics across the journalism business that we no longer use the names of shooters. We simply call them disturbed individuals or maladjusted malcontents or something that nobody would want to be called, right? You know, call them, you know, use a standardized phrase for them and no longer show their pictures. Real simple.
Yeah, don't give them the blowout. Don't give them the blowout that they want. You know, their big moment in the sun.
Right, and it's not like we don't know how to do this. I mean, we shield rape victims from publicity. To help the rape victims, we could equally shield, and maybe the wrong word, but you know what I'm talking about, shield shooters from publicity. I mean, it's like I said, this is not rocket science. We've been doing this for 40 years.
Yeah, and I don't know why it can't be done. It would totally disincentivize any of these actions.
Well, to the extent that any of them are motivated by the desire for the blaze of glory part, which clearly some of them are. So there's a whole bunch of different moving pieces here that we need to look at. Number one is their motivation. If they're, this kid apparently also had a romance that went bad. Plus, according to the Anti-Defamation League, he was part of a white supremacist group in Florida where he went out and did shooting practice with these guys. So, I mean, it's like there's a whole, with his Make America Great hat, there's all this, there's all these pieces to it. And of course, my proposal that people have to have a liability insurance if they're going to own a gun. And I suspect any insurance company would have looked at this guy and said, oh, he's been reported to the FBI. OK, you want to buy insurance, liability insurance for your gun? It's going to be $10,000 a month. It's just like, the 4-time convicted drunk driver. I mean, good luck calling Geico and getting your driver insurance, your car insurance. It ain't going to happen.
Attack it on all fronts. Attack it on every front.
Yeah,
insurance,
because they're
notoriety, no notoriety, that everything.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Marco Rubio was just tweeting, some biblical quote about God's in charge of everything, and it's like, oh my God, I just had to retweet it and say, are you serious? Are you serious? Marco Rubio, who took, let's see here, $3,303,355 from the NRA in the last election. Amazing. Bill, thank you for the call. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back.
Fourth, they blame economic stresses on immigrants or racial or religious minorities and foment public bias or even violence against them, threaten mass deportations, registries of religious minorities, and the banning of refugees. Fifth, call anyone who opposes them an enemy and hit back hard at them, questioning their motives or their character.
Richard in Evanston, Illinois. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today?
Oh, it's about guns. Boy, I'm trying to get my thoughts concise here. One of the things that I can't understand is that these politicians get away with making these laws, the Republicans, and the NRA types, and they exclude themselves from the effects of them largely. I mean, they do travel, but they have bodyguards like the shooting.
Well, and they have a gun ban in the Capitol.
Yeah, precisely, and that's where I was sort of getting at. I don't know why the NRA and the gun nuts aren't inflamed by that, because one of your callers chimed in about, the tyrannical government, and that's why they have guns. You would think that they would just be, frothing at the mouth over it.
Yeah.
That they can't bring him in there, and they can't have a bump stock in the gallery of the combined Senate, and why don't the reporters ever say to one of these guys who's pushing these bills, well, what's wrong with having guns in the Senate? You know damn well, they probably could weasel out of it, but damn well, we all do, and it would expose them and maybe get more people to get reasonable about this.
Yeah. I would love to see this on. Can you imagine this on Face the Nation or Meet the Press? Well, Senator Richard Burr, you took almost $7 million from the NRA. Are you in favor of doing away with the gun ban in the Senate chambers? Well, Senator Roy Blunt, you took $4.5 million from the NRA. Are you going to do away with the gun ban in the Senate? Tom Tillis, you took $4.4 million. Cory Gardner, $3.8 million. Marco Rubio, $3.3 million. Rob Portman, $3 million. Todd Young, $2.8 million. Bill Cassidy, $2.8 million. You guys took all this money from the NRA. Are you going to do away with the gun bans?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm waiting to have happen. I mean, it's so obvious, and it would maybe get people to wake up that that if they hate government or, why would they exclude themselves? And that's the federal courts too, and that's everywhere.
Right.
And I'm not advocating it. Because we all know that the guns are dangerous.
It's just an illustration of their hypocrisy, Richard. I get it. I get it totally. Richard, I have to move along, but thank you. Very well said. Appreciate the call. Charlie actually, Charlie, hold on just a second. I just want to share this poll. We did a poll on YouTube yesterday, and on our poll, it's Israel's Netanyahu may weather corruption allegations for now. Should he resign? 0% said no, he should stay. 4% said nothing proven, he says. 33% said yes, he should go for the sake of the country. 54% yes, it's time for a change. 8%, what's he done? So anyhow, Charlie in Paulsboro, Illinois. Hey, Charlie, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to point out that with 18 school shootings this year, there's only been 30 days of school. So we're working on 3 per week.
Right.
And there was another thing that I just wanted to say real quick, and
that's more than one every other day, isn't it?
It's yes. We looked it up on the counter. You could almost expect it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Wow.
That's getting a little over the top, maybe.
I don't think so. 15 is half of 30. I mean, 18 is, anyway. Continue.
Yeah. And there's one other thing, there's a mental problem in this country maybe, but I'm starting to believe that it's mostly congressional.
Oh, it's entirely congressional, and it all has to do with the NRA passing out money that they collected from gun manufacturers.
Yeah.
I mean,
can I add one more thing?
Sure.
A little while ago, you made a comment about why people aren't just running to get out of the country.
Right.
Nobody else wants us.
Oh, I know. When George W. Bush was elected, and before I was doing this show, I was just, writing books and giving speeches and stuff. This was in 2001. And I actually contacted the Norwegian embassy and said, my dad is full-blooded Norwegian. Both his parents were Norwegian immigrants. Will you guys take me? And, Louise and I have been to Norway a bunch of times. We love the country. And they were like, well, first you have to learn Norwegian fluently, and I don't speak a word of it. Secondly, you've got to bring a lot of money to the country. Third, the process can take over a decade. And fourth, only a very small percentage of people who are, apply for citizenship are granted it. Norway basically doesn't want Americans. I've been there.
It's almost a hell no.
Yeah. It's. I mean, the Norwegians are. The last time we were in Norway was just a few months ago. The Norwegians are looking at us going, "You guys are friggin' nuts." I mean, what is wrong with you? And you just want to say, it's all the money, but you can't. Charlie, thank you for the call. Well said. David in Rockford, Illinois. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hello. I'm glad to talk to you. I still think of you as Molly Ivan's kid buddy.
That's high praise. Thank you, Dave.
A small item. When you talk about the Australian gun buyback, that gun buyback was not voluntary. So every time a leftist like me says Australia, the people on the right say gun confiscation because that's what it included.
Well, it wasn't voluntary. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Maybe you know more about this than I do, Dave. But my understanding was they changed the gun laws for who could own a gun, which caused a couple of 100,000, I think it was 600,000 guns to be in the possession of people who legally didn't have the right to own them anymore. So then they said, we will buy them back at retail price so you don't lose money on your gun. And that's what they did. Do I have that right, Dave?
Well, if you say that the government's saying you can no longer have this gun, but at least we'll compensate you for it.
That's correct.
In confiscation.
Yeah, no, you could argue that that's confiscation. I still support it. I think it was a good idea. Dave, thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Today we're reading from Requiem for the American Dream, the 10 Principles of Concentration of Wealth and Power by Noam Chomsky. brand new book. From the preface, a note on the American dream. During the Great Depression, which I'm old enough to remember, it was bad, much worse objectively than today. But there was a sense that we'll get out of this somehow, an expectation that things are going to get better. Maybe we don't have jobs today, but they'll be coming back tomorrow and we can work together for a brighter future. This was a time of a lot of political radicalism that would hopefully lead to a different future, one with more justice, equality, and freedom. Breaking down repressive class structures, and so on. There was just a general sense that this will work out somehow. Most of my family, for instance, were unemployed working class. The rise of the union movement itself was a reflection of, and a source of, optimism and hopefulness. And that's missing today. Today, there's a general feeling that nothing's coming back. It's over. The American dream, like most dreams, has large elements of myth to it. Part of the 19th century dream was the Horatio Alger story. We're dirt poor, but we're going to work hard and we'll find a way out of it, which was true to an extent. Take my father, who came in 1913 from a very poor village in Eastern Europe. He was able to get a job in a sweatshop in Baltimore and gradually work himself up to the point where he could go to college, get a degree, and finally even a PhD. He ended up living what's called a middle-class lifestyle. A lot of people could do that. It was possible for immigrants from Europe in the early days to achieve a level of wealth, privilege, freedom, and independence that wouldn't have been imaginable in their countries of origin. But now we simply know that that's not true anymore. Social mobility, in fact, is lower here than it is in Europe. But the dream persists, fostered by propaganda. You hear it in every political speech. Vote for me, you'll get the dream back. They all reiterate it in similar words. You even hear it from people who are destroying the dream, whether they know it or not. But the dream has to be sustained. Otherwise, how are you going to get people in the richest, most powerful country in world history with extraordinary advantages to face the reality that they see around them? Inequality is really unprecedented. If you look at total inequality now, it's like the worst periods of American history. But if you refine it more closely, the inequality comes from the extreme wealth in a tiny sector of the population, a fraction of the 1%. There were periods like the Gilded Age in the 1890s and the Roaring '20s and so on, when a situation developed rather similar to this. But the current period is extreme. Because if you look at the wealth distribution, the inequality comes mostly from super wealthy. Literally, the top 0.1% are just super wealthy. This is the result of over 30 years of a shift in social and economic policy. If you check, you find that over the course of these years, the government policy has been modified completely against the will of the population to provide enormous benefits to the very rich. And for most of the population, the majority, real incomes have almost stagnated for over 30 years. The middle class, in that sense, that unique American sense, is under severe attack. A significant part of the American dream is class mobility. You're born poor, you work hard, you get rich. The idea that it's possible for everyone to get a decent job, buy a home, get a car before their children go to school, and have their children go to school, it's all collapsed. Take a look at American society. Imagine yourself looking down from Mars. What do you see? In the United States, there are professed values like democracy. In a democracy, public opinion is going to have some influence on policy, and then the government carries out actions determined by the population. That's what democracy means. It's important to understand that privileged and powerful sectors have never liked democracy, and for very good reasons. Democracy puts power into the hands of the general population and takes it away from the privileged and powerful. It's a principle of concentration of wealth and power. Concentration of wealth yields concentration of power, particularly so as the cost of elections skyrockets, which forces the political parties even more deeply into the pockets of major corporations. This political power quickly translates into legislation that then increases the concentration of wealth. So fiscal policy, like tax policy, deregulation, rules of corporate governance, and a whole variety of measures, political measures designed to increase the concentration of wealth and power, yields more political power to do the same thing. And that's what we've been seeing. So we have this kind of vicious cycle in progress. I mean, the wealthy always did have an inordinate amount of control over policy. Actually, that goes back centuries. It's so traditional that it was described by Adam Smith in 1776. You read the famous Wealth of Nations. He says in England, quote, "The principal architects of policy are the people who own the society." In his day, in Adam Smith's day, merchants and manufacturers. And they make sure that their own interests are very well cared for, however grievous the impact on the people of England or others. Now, it's not merchants and manufacturers, it's financial institutions and multinational corporations. The people who Adam Smith called the masters of mankind, and they're following the vile maxim, all for ourselves and nothing for anyone else. They're just going to pursue policies that benefit them and harm everyone else. Well, that's a pretty general maxim of politics that's been studied closely in the United States. Those are the policies that have increasingly been followed. And in the absence of a general popular reaction, that's pretty much what you'd expect. Then we get into principle number 1, reduce democracy. And, he goes through his 10 principles. The book, Requiem for the American Dream. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. Interesting piece in Psychology Today, and tip of the hat to the person who shared this with me. Leonard Berkowitz, emeritus professor of psychology at the University of Wisconsin, writes, guns not only permit violence, they can also stimulate it as well. The finger pulls the trigger, but the trigger may also be pulling the finger. There was this fascinating study that was done back in 1967 by Anthony LePage and Leonard Berkowitz. And first, they had the people who are participating in the study who didn't realize that they were the guinea pigs, right? First, they had the person be upset. They had another participant do something that upset them. Next, they were seated at a table that had a shotgun and a revolver on it, or for the control, badminton rackets and shuttlecocks, right, for playing badminton. The items on the table were described as part of another experiment, but the researcher had supposedly forgot to put away. The participant was supposed to decide what level of electric shock to deliver to the Confederate who angered them. And the shocks were supposed to be used to measure aggression. The experimenter told participants to ignore the items on the table. But the participants who saw the guns were more aggressive than the participants who saw the sports item. This has been dubbed the weapons effect. And the weapons effect actually happens outside the lab, too. For example, a Confederate driving a pickup truck purposely remained stalled at a traffic light for 12 seconds to see whether motorists trapped behind him would honk their horns, a measure of aggression. The truck contained either a .303 caliber military rifle and a gun rack that you could see, or no rifle. The results showed the motorists were more likely to honk their horns if the Confederate was driving a truck with a gun visible in the rear window than not. And, which seems counterintuitive, but basically just seeing a gun makes us more aggressive. Can you imagine what owning a gun does? Barbara in Seattle. Hey, Barbara, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm calling because I think people should celebrate the 200th anniversary of the publication of Frankenstein. And you can pick up the New Yorker this week. It's the February 12th and 19th issue, double issue, their annual New Yorker special issue. And people should read it because
what does that have to do with gun violence, Barbara?
It has everything to do with all the politics that's been going on for 200 years.
Please illuminate me.
Well, the argument
issue
between Darwin and Wilberforce about whether science or philosophy or theology would solve problems. And it was actually the person who wrote this was part of the left-wing English politics in the 1700s, 1800s. It was the argument between Darwin and Wilberforce, and people should understand that you get what you subsidize.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a very simple formula, and you're absolutely right, Barbara. And we've been subsidizing guns in this country for a long, long time. Dave in Holyoke, Massachusetts, listening to WHMP. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Sick to my stomach, sick to my heart, not sick in the head, Tom. Thanks for taking my call today. I have a solution for this, all this gun violence.
And that is?
And I'm going to make an appeal, a desperate appeal to the listeners. Don't buy one more bullet, don't buy one more gun until we get this fixed. And if you know hunters out there, appeal to their sense of logic and say, don't buy anything until this is fixed. And if we spread that word around, we'll get the attention of the manufacturers and then the politicians. But I don't want to mention the B word because that's a curse word in a capitalist society. But yeah, I'm just making.
You're talking boycott?
Now.
Is that the B word you're talking about? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I that's not going to happen. But I understand your sentiments, and what we have is a corrupt industry that. Go ahead.
Why wouldn't just good people not buy guns or?
I think by and large, good people aren't buying guns to begin with. What we know is that about 3% of gun owners own a disproportionate number of guns. I don't remember the percentage now, but it's something like 20-25% of all guns are owned by about 3% of people. These are people who, just like my riff on billionaires, billionaires have some, not all billionaires, obviously, but the ones that are obsessive about getting more billion. I only got 30 billion. I need 60 billion. I only have 60 billion. I need 100 billion. These people have obsessive-compulsive disorder in the form of hoarding syndrome. They're just like people. If they had not been born rich or they had not figured out a way to get rich, then they would be the people who would be, in their apartment or their house. They would have newspapers up to the ceiling. They'd have, thousands of empty tin cans. They are hoarders. But because the thing that they have the greatest access to is not newspapers or tin cans, it's money, they're hoarding money. Same thing with guns. You've got a small percentage of people who are hoarding guns and buying lots and lots and lots and lots of guns. And that, in my opinion, should be in and of itself a signal of possible mental illness. Richard in Los Angeles. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thank you. Yesterday I read an article that Remington Firearms applied for bankruptcy protection.
Was this to avoid liability lawsuits, or this because business isn't good?
Yeah. Business is not good, plus they do have a couple lawsuits.
Interesting.
And the thing is, the most important thing is, ever since President Obama left office, gun sales have drastically dropped off.
Oh, yeah.
Because the NRA used the propaganda that Obama or Hillary were going to take their guns away.
I have told this story, before, Richard. It's probably been a while since I told it, so it's probably worth revisiting. In 2009, it was Christmas of 2008. The election had just happened a few weeks earlier. Barack Obama had just been elected president. He was not yet president. And I was in Michigan. Louise and I, I grew up in Michigan. My three brothers all lived there. And I think in 2008, my mom was even still alive, maybe not. But in any case, Louise and I were in Michigan, and when I get together with my brothers, at least a couple of my brothers like to go shooting. One of my brothers has a gun range in his backyard. I mean, he lives way out in the country, and it's totally safe, and it's kind of a cool thing. And so we went to this gun range near Lansing. It was in Mason, Michigan. It was just south of Lansing, big gun range down there. And we went in, and I tried to buy, there was like 5 of us. So it was two of my brothers and my nephew and one of my kids and like that. And so I said, I'd like to buy, 5 boxes of ammunition. And he's like, you can have 2. That's it. We're limiting everybody to 2 boxes of ammunition. And I looked up on the shelf, and the shelves were like half empty. And I'm like, why? And he says, just with this like ferocious tone of voice, he says, because that N-word, only he used the actual word, that just got elected president is going to take away everybody's guns, and we know it. And I said, what are you talking about? He pulls out his phone and pulls up this email, this viral email that, is talking about some legislation that Barack Obama has already got in the pipeline that's going to confiscate everybody's gun, blah, 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 and except it won't happen in the inner cities because those, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's just this insanely racist rant. And I was like, come on, And at that point, I just decided, okay, everybody here is armed, and I'm not yet. And so I'm just going to drop this conversation. But that's what was going on when Obama was elected.
Oh, another thing, too, Tom, they interviewed Senator Mike Rounds, I think, South Dakota.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they were talking about the clips with having, 20, 30 rounds in a clip.
Right.
And he said, well, even if we reduce the clips to like 3, 4, 5 rounds, people will just buy multiple clips.
Sure.
So you can't even discuss this with people.
But, you know, and then you try and tell them that, you know, the guy who shot Gabby Giffords and killed several people, including a 7-year-old girl, the only thing that stopped him was that while he was trying to replace the clip, the magazine in his gun, or the clip on his gun, another guy tackled him. And by the way, there were 2 people in the crowd who had guns with them, who had concealed carry permits, but they couldn't get off a shot because it was a crowd. But somebody tackled the guy, and because he had to replace his ammunition. If he had had that AR-15 with a 30-round clip in it, there wouldn't have been seven people shot. There would have been 20.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Very well said. I appreciate the call. Josh in Clovis, New Mexico. Hey, Josh, what's on your mind?
How's it going? I was just wanting to touch on some points that I think kind of get missed sometimes.
Sure.
You know, even if we were to make it almost impossible for someone to go out and purchase a gun, I mean, what makes you think that these people who are doing this, mass shootings and whatnot, are going through legal channels to get these weapons?
Let me ask you a reverse question, Josh. Why do you think it is that in Canada, in all of Europe, in Japan, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in South Korea, they have fewer than one mass shooting per 100,000 people in any given year? Fewer than, you know, they had, it's virtually, I mean, I'm not even mass shootings, just total gun deaths. And we average around 4 per 100,000 people. We are an absolute outlier. We are the only country in the world that has more than 1 gun death per 100,000 people, and we're at 4. Most of these countries are at 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. You know, Germany had, what, 3 shootings all of last year? The UK, 2, I believe it was. So, you know, your argument, Josh, is completely irrelevant. If you get the guns out of the society, you get them off the streets. It's just like Thompson machine guns. You know, they were a big thing in the 1930s. John Dillinger and all these guys were using them. We outlawed them. I've shot a Thompson machine gun. The only place you can find them is in a gun range. That's it. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We need to figure out what to do about this. And I think the answers are quite simple. All we have to do is emulate what other countries have done. Welcome back. Sunday in Newcastle, Wyoming. Hey, Sunday, what's on your mind today?
You know, you always say that it's an excuse to claim mental illness for these atrocities that are happening.
Well, no, it's not an excuse. I mean, there is a clear association between mental illness and mass shootings. The problem is that had the mentally ill people not had access to guns, and I found the story. It was the Newtown shooting. When I think it was 33 kids were killed in Newtown, there were 30 kids who were stabbed in China, outside of Beijing, by a crazy man who ran into a school. So on the exact same day, you had roughly the exact same situation. None of those children in China died. All of those kids in Newtown died. The difference was the gun.
Okay, aside from that, I think what's happening is induced mental illness. Dr. Yolanda Lucier has a published article on cytochrome P450 2D6 pathways. That's a genetic test. And a person that is deficient or has a non-existent 2D6 pathway, it affects the way they metabolize drugs, not just illegal drugs, but all drugs, including over-the-counter drugs. And people can react badly. It can cause suicides or killings. People that internalize blame tend to commit suicide. Those who externalize blame tend to do these killings.
Right.
And so with the pharmacies supplying all the drugs and the news media constantly keeping the fear factor in play, there's a synergistic effect that just kind of builds up, and I think that's what's creating the mentality of pro-NRA stuff.
Well, I agree with everything you said except the very last part. I think what's creating the mentality of pro-NRA is that the NRA is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to promote their agenda, including buying politicians. But, you know, your point is really well taken. In fact, this morning I asked Louise, I said, do you think we should get Peter Breggin back on? He's a psychiatrist, a professor of psychiatry, and the author of numerous books. And he takes the position that the vast majority of these shootings, particularly the ones done by young people, but even some of the older folks, the vast majority of these shootings are done by people who are on SSRI drugs, so the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor drugs, which, yes, the cytochrome pathways may be influencing how they're metabolized, but just in and of themselves, I mean, these drugs are black labeled. Their principal side effect is suicide. And what happens is people take these drugs because they can't deal with the pain of being alive, you know, basically for depression. And so it decreases that pain. What it does is it separates us from our own feelings. It separates us, which includes empathy. So no longer, when people are on these drugs, no longer do they as vividly see other human beings as human beings. They start seeing everybody in the world as a them, and them as the only I, or the only we, essentially. It's a one-person we. And so it's a lot easier to kill somebody if you don't acknowledge their humanity, if you don't experience their humanity. And antidepressant drugs, particularly the SSRI drugs, actually have that effect. That's the mechanism by which they increase the probability of suicide. They increase the probability of suicide because people stopped considering the impact on their friends and family of their own death. You know,
well, most of the people that are committing these mass killings are on the antipsychotic drugs, and if they can't metabolize them, that would have an effect.
You're absolutely right. I know. But I think even if they can metabolize them, they're having an effect. I don't think that that's the principal thing here, but I think it's a clear and problematic exacerbating factor. Sunday, thank you for the call. Very well said. We'll be back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. With you, Linda in Ottawa, Illinois. Hey, Linda, what's on your mind?
Hi. I was thinking about a way to civil disobedience sort of thing. It's
to protest the proliferation of guns?
Well, what I think we should do, and this would take a lot of organization, but recently I, for instance, went to the Women's March in Chicago. I had to drive an hour to get a train to get into Chicago to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what would be great in this nation is supposedly 80% of us feel that this way, that we don't want these guns in our lives. We don't want the money in politics. If we could just boycott as a group, start a social media where, for instance, we don't buy anything for a day. The whole nation, anybody that believes in this, give it a name like Honoring the Dead. For the entire nation, anybody that truly believes this, you don't go to Walmart, you don't go to Home Depot, you don't buy a single thing that day.
Aren't people just going to buy more before and after?
And then for that day, but I mean, you start off with one day, you take it 2 days. But I think with like the marches, I enjoyed participating, but I think a lot of these, people in Congress look at that and say, oh, isn't that sweet? They're marching.
Right.
But if you had, and it was a limited amount because, like I said, I had to make a concerted effort, being from a small town, to get to a march.
Right.
If you had the whole nation saying, this is it. Yeah. All of us are going to say, you'd have all these empty stores, all these empty roads, and just say, this is how serious we are.
Yeah.
And if this isn't fixed, we're going to get even more serious about this.
Yep. It's a start, Linda, and I'm not opposed to anything that's a start. I think, though, that at the end of the day, it is going to be at the ballot box. We have to sweep out of office these people like Cory Gardner and Marco Rubio, who have taken literally millions of dollars from the NRA in order to facilitate the agenda of murdering more and more of our children and citizens, and replace them with people who are not willing to take money from the NRA. But I think your points are well made, Linda, and I appreciate the call. Eric in New York City. Hey, Eric, what's up?
Hey, how you doing? You're always saying about the guns, but when you were kids, they had guns. But my parents had guns. Your parents had guns. We never thought about taking the gun.
Yeah, my parents did not have guns, Eric, but yeah.
Well, mine did. Okay.
Okay.
I never thought about taking it. If I had a problem with kids in the class or I was being bullied, I never thought about, grabbing a gun to solve my problem.
Right.
That would solve my problem. Why now, this period that our kids are taking these guns and they feel that that's the only way they can solve a problem is with a gun.
Right.
Going to school, shooting up the whole class. I mean, we better check ourselves. And it's something about our moral value.
Eric,
the morals that we had when I was a kid and you was a kid is totally different than today.
But the other thing that's completely different, Eric, is the economy. And back when you and I were kids, there were lots and lots of opiate drugs around. Everybody had, in their medicine cabinet, half a bottle of, leftover narcotics from when they broke their arm or when they fell off their bike or whatever. And yet there wasn't this epidemic of addiction. What happens is when Purdue Pharmaceuticals and their salespeople and their distributors come in and dump millions and millions of pills into communities, suddenly you've got more pills and you've got an addiction epidemic. Same thing, we got 1 million guns out here. On top of that, the economy is disintegrating, and the consequence of the disintegrating economy, as Michael Hudson pointed out,
our morals are disintegrating. That's what is disintegrating, Tom.
But Eric, when people have good jobs, it's easy to maintain good morals.
Yeah, back in the day when people didn't have good jobs. I mean when people were living, living on hard food.
Sure.
Still, we didn't do some of these.
So what's your solution, Eric?
What's my solution? My solution is that, hey, we got to start putting the moral back in our kids' hearts.
How?
In our kids' hearts. Let our kids know.
How?
See right now, a lady said something to you earlier.
How?
She said I'm telling you. She said the Darwin theory and the theology theory. When we had the theology theory, and when we taught our kids that there's something greater than us, they then.
So your answer is religion?
They have more. No, I don't believe in religion, John. See, I believe that the Lord is real. See, religion is things that men create. But from what we know about the universe and everything we know about the universe, we know that there's something greater than us.
Fewer than 10% of most Europeans go to church regularly, Bill. Eric, excuse me.
You don't have to go to church. It's not about going to church.
No, my point is that Western Europe is highly non-religious, and they don't have mass shootings like we do. I'm telling you, Eric, the problem is guns. You can make neoliberalism number two, but I get what you're saying, and thank you for your rant. We're starting to get redundant here. Lisa in St. Paul. Hey, Lisa, what's up?
Hi, I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thanks, Lisa. We just have a minute till the end of the show, so quick one.
Okay, I'm a survivor of gun violence, and I'm addressing the cost of gun violence you were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. And I witnessed my mother's murder, her shooting death, when I was 16.
Oh, my.
And my father's near death. He was shot 3 times and survived. And I was shot at, but the guy missed. And my point is, I then had to have some psychological help to integrate this into my life. And just a quick math, I've spent upwards of $50,000 in psychological help that was not covered by my insurance. And I'm a self-employed freelance musician. In a good year, I make $50,000. And the cost just in therapy is astounding, and none of that was covered.
Not to mention the cost of your father's disability from being shot 3 times?
Yeah. And my mother's funeral.
Yeah.
And the ripple effect is unbelievable.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And all of these kids in this school, their lives have been changed forever. And in ways that are not good. I mean, not good for them, not good for society, but very good for the NRA, apparently. We still got this bozo congressman, what's his name here, U.S. Representative Lynn Jenkins. No, I'm sorry, Tyler Tannehill. Tyler Tannehill for Congress. You too can win an AR-15. Brilliant. It's all over Facebook. Thanks a lot for the call. And thank you for being with us today. We have to do something about this. And step 1, vote out the politicians that take NRA money. Tag You're It. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242.
Or visit tomsbeets.com.